Chapter 1492. With the power of destruction, the finger sliced through space and tore apart Harmonious Morris Alba's wings to reveal the vast expanse. It shot through the fog of resentment Old Man Extermination had gathered and appeared in front of Su Ming. It was a light tap, and it contained a supreme power that could destroy all wills, and it touched Su Ming. Su Ming did not turn his head back. He lifted his right hand and cut down the river of forgetfulness. His body shuddered and coughed up blood, but he gritted his teeth and stood firmly. He simply allowed the destruction behind him to drown him. A determined light shone in his eyes. He wanted to personally see the river of forgetfulness cut down and see that the people of Ninth Summit could return to that world once the river of forgetfulness could no longer flow in reverse. That was why he could not let the finger behind him surpass him. He could not let anything happen to the people of Ninth Summit. As Su Ming persevered, Tion shuddered in death vortex. When he coughed up blood, he continued maintaining the completeness of his life matrix. However, a large number of cracks had already started appearing on it. Tion's eyes were bloodshot, and he let out a roar of his life. His body instantly withered, and he gathered all his life force to send it into the life matrix. However, with Su Ming's level of cultivation, he could not last for long. In the end, he could not fulfill his wish. During that instant, his legs crumbled, as if they could not withstand the destructive power. Tion's legs also crumbled along with them. At the instant Su Ming's body was about to be destroyed by the destructive power, a six-colored gust of wind appeared beside him and surrounded him. Under the destructive finger, it helped Su Ming endure an unknown amount of damage, and in the end, it managed to pull him away from the finger. The six-colored gust of wind was Arid Triad. Without Su Ming blocking it, the finger touched the river of forgetfulness at the instant it was cut down and the vortex was about to disappear. It touched the river of forgetfulness. It was destroyed. Su Ming saw his eldest senior brother's body turn into ashes at that instant. He saw his second senior brother sigh softly and look at Su Ming with a smile on his lips. But his head flew up once his body was destroyed and turned into nothingness. He saw Hu Zi roaring, saw Yu Xian's gaze, saw the tears at the corners of Tsang Lan's eyes, and saw Su Hui pursing her lips before she closed her eyes in anguish. There was also the elder, Chong He, Nan Gong Hen, and all the other faces. In the end, Xian Zhang's finger replaced all their gazes. When the river of forgetfulness shattered and the vortex disappeared, everything turned into memories at that instant. It was as if the blades of wind and the swords of frost had turned into shrill notes of resentment. The faint whimpering of the flute in the distance in his dreams had long since shattered the time that filled his heart and turned into eternity. It turned into autumn leaves that landed before Su Ming's lifeless eyes, bringing with it a bleak and lonely air. The appearance of the autumn leaf covered Su Ming's eyes. It was as if the mountains and rivers in his memories had reached their end without a single sound. When the leaf fell before Su Ming's eyes, it revealed his lifeless eyes, and they seemed to contain the feeling that in the end, there would only be an eternally silent world, and that time would descend to the ends of the world like snow. Time seemed to have frozen before Su Ming's eyes at that moment. At some unknown point in time, tears that looked like blood had appeared at the corners of his eyes. Those tears streaked down his cheeks and fell under his feet. They fell into the empty galaxy, and he wondered whether a flower known as the Ninth Summit would bloom at the spot where his blood fell. Su Ming did not know. Xian Zhang's finger slowly rose and moved toward Su Ming. It might have seemed slow, but there was killing intent in it. In an instant, it closed in on Su Ming. Su Ming was his offering. Every single time he harvested a Harmonious Morris Alba, he would taste him first. The six-colored wind beside Su Ming turned into Arid Triad. He stood beside Su Ming and watched the finger approach him. A bitter smile appeared at the corners of his lips, but there was an air of freedom on his face. Su Ming, I was wrong. Everything you said before was correct, but I don't regret it. I devoured Harmonious Morris Alba and became the master of this expanse cosmos. I also became a cultivator, and an existence that belonged to harmonious Morris Alba. I don't know how many years I have lived. I thought I'd already forgotten the past, but I still remember that tree. I still remember my family and friends. Su Ming, I became harmonious Morris Alba. This is my disaster, but it is not known as harmonious Morris Alba's disaster. It only has one name, Arid Triad's disaster. This is my disaster, and for this disaster to appear in my name, I, Arid Triad, am satisfied with my life. You are different. You have come to understand a hint of boundless Tao realm, and your future will be even greater. Leave this place, and if one day you succeed in your Tao, remember to take revenge for me. Our friendship will not have been in vain. Arid Triad turned his head around to look at Su Ming and said with a smile. There was determination in his smile, along with a hint of dignity. I've always thought that if we were born in the same era, we would be the best of friends. Arid Triad lifted his right hand and struck Su Ming. Su Ming immediately charged backwards, and when he turned around, powerful fighting spirit appeared in his eyes. He charged towards Xianzang's incoming finger. From the distance, the finger was like fire, and Arid Triad was like a moth. If the moth did not extinguish the fire, then the fire would burn the moth. That determination and that figure erupted with the most brilliant splendor in all of Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos at that instant. Death is not terrifying. I have already attained my Tao, so what's wrong with dying? My death will prove my Tao. My death will not be the heavens coming to destroy me. Instead, it will be an even more dazzling Tao quest. Arid Triad's disaster. Arid Triad's disaster. Arid Triad should be laughing at me for having such a disaster. A long string of laughter echoed in the air. When it landed in Su Ming's ears, he felt as if time flowed like water. He lifted his palm in the water and watched the clear water disappear through the gaps between his fingers. He listened to the whimpers that moved through the cracks of time. He felt as if his memories were rising and falling while his heart was buried in reality. His dreams were also filled with the sorrow of having his tears cut off. Su Ming laughed. He laughed loudly, and as he laughed, tears of blood continuously fell from his eyes. His laughter was shrill and forlorn. It echoed through the entire world and the universe. There was madness in his laughter, along with an even greater determination. Harmonious Morris Alba, I, Su Ming, have the will to live. If I don't destroy your entire race and all your kind, I will not be able to die in peace. Life extermination, if I don't let you experience the pain I felt today 100 or even 1,000-fold, if I don't kill your physical body, destroy your bones, scatter your ashes, extract your soul, devour it, and crush it for 10,000 years, then I will never be able to see the light again. Dark Dawn, Saint D-Fire, 2 great camps, 360 expanse cosmoses. Before the disaster dies, I will kill all of you. And Xinzong, I originally only wanted to live and wait for the day when I could search for them who were sent to the other expanse cosmos. But since you stopped all of this, then you're the target of my possession. Even if I have to spend the rest of my life, I will possess you. Only when I possess you can I open the abyss gate and search for their traces in the passage of time. I can resurrect them one by one. Su Ming's hair did not turn white like the scene in The Secrets of the Universe. It was still purple, but the sorrow spreading out from it became an eternal memory in Su Ming's heart. It was as eternal as the color of the universe. During that instant, Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos started collapsing in front of Su Ming. It was the pressure from the space above, the planets rumbling and shattering, and the lives dying and vanishing into nothingness. Similarly, the body formed by Arid Triad and Xianzang's finger had been burned by the candle flame during Arid Triad's disaster. The sky and the earth, the universe and the universe, the space and the galaxy. During that instant, it was as if 2 huge palms had crashed into each other, crushing all traces of the true worlds and all the lives that existed, including the powerful warriors of the previous eons who thought that they could live safely. They had long since noticed that the disaster this time was different from the others, but they could not escape from it. They could only descend into madness in the midst of death and let out shrill roars that were drowned out by the booming sounds. Su Ming turned around. He no longer had legs, and only his sleeve remained on his left hand. However, his body exuded a purple darkness that was filled with madness and evil to the extreme. His body was filled with the presence formed by the purple darkness. That presence surrounded him and turned into Su Ming's legs, his left hand, his legs, and his left hand. It was a completely different color from the skin around him. With the killing intent in Su Ming's eyes and the madness in his heart, he turned into a long arc. At the instant arid triad collapsed, he stepped into Dark Dawn and Saint Defire's camps. Since the 360 Expanse Cosmoses were certain that Su Ming had attacked them before, then he might as well truly attack and snatch lives from the destruction of the disaster, because these people had once tried to stop Su Ming with their resentment. Then, as if it was predestined by the secrets of the universe, since Su Ming was fated to die, then they were also fated to die. Su Ming stepped into Dark Dawn and Saint Defire, causing the galaxy above them to be crushed by the Expanse Cosmoses. Su Ming turned into a purple gust of wind in the crack between the sky and the earth. His figure was in the wind, and wherever he went, the bodies and souls of the Expanse Cosmoses and races would be destroyed. Su Ming's slaughter was filled with his determination. Only when he was in the Heavenly Fox's territory did Zirua lift her head to stare at the sky. When she saw Su Ming's figure in the purple sky, her gaze was profound. As she stared at him, Su Ming walked past them. He did not stop. Neither did he make things difficult for the Heavenly Foxes. However, besides the Expanse Cosmos where the bald crane had once stared at the lake for 100 years, the other places had already turned into a bloodbath. Behind Su Ming, the Expanse Cosmoses that no longer had any lives were crushed by the sky and turned into nothingness. When Su Ming took a step forward, he charged upwards, shot through space, and rushed into the Expanse Cosmos where the fourth wing was. With killing intent in his voice, he charged towards the region where Old Man Extermination was. Along the way, it was as if withered wood that had been crushed by time had turned into a piece of clear paper. No matter what color it was in the past, once ink was splashed on it, it would turn into the color of a world separated from the world, but it would never return to its original state. The third chapter. Chapter 1493. Kill. There seems to be only slaughter left in my world. Only this sort of slaughter and the waves of heat caused by blood can let me know that I still exist. Kill. If I don't kill, then the world will think that I killed them. If I don't kill, then the resentment will continue to grow stronger. If I don't kill, then I will let down my heart, my Tao, and ninth summit. That's why I, Su Ming, can only kill. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. I don't want to think about it. At that moment, I feel as if my heart has lost its emptiness. The memories of the people of Ninth Summit before they were destroyed have turned into madness that makes me lose my soul. Besides killing, what else can I do? Even if they are weaklings, and weaklings should not die, they deserve to die. If they did not confuse me and block me with the resentment they gathered together, none of this should have happened. That's why they deserve to die. That's why, since they were certain that it was me, then I might as well pretend that it was me. Since they don't need me to explain myself, then I, Su Ming, will no longer explain myself to anyone. This is my Tao and my path. Those who understand me will know my heart, and those who don't, what does their death have to do with me? Su Ming threw his head back and laughed. His laughter was forlorn, and blood flowed down from the corners of his eyes, as if he wanted to spill his tears of blood on each Expanse Cosmos. Wherever he went, a bloody storm would follow. Worlds overlapped behind him, and the disaster descended behind him. Destruction appeared behind him, and he laughed ferociously. However, that ferocious laughter eventually turned into a roar, because before the disaster, Su Ming had already sent his own disaster to bathe the world in blood. He walked past Dark Dawn and Saint Defire, and with the purple wind sweeping up the sea of blood, Su Ming rushed into the fourth Expanse Cosmos, descending from above. He tore through space and shot through the barrier of the expanse cosmos. At the instant he stepped into the fourth expanse cosmos, the endless booming sounds that belonged to the expanse cosmos echoed in his ears. However, when Su Ming heard them, he found them incredibly annoying. He had been in a brutal state to begin with, and at that moment his heart could not calm down, and his thoughts could not flow smoothly, which was why he threw his head back and roared. "Be quiet." The world rumbled. Su Ming's voice instantly swept through the entire fourth expanse cosmos and filled the entire area. With his will, he changed the laws in the universe, causing the laws in the universe to instantly crumble. The loud bangs that had been echoing in the place for an eternity instantly shattered. It was as if the booming sounds were afraid of Su Ming. It was as if the endless, loud bangs had stopped trembling before Su Ming, causing the entire fourth expanse cosmos to instantly fall into dead silence. There were no more booming sounds. When everything fell silent, the purple gust that was Su Ming swept through the area and charged towards the gap leading to the vast expanse, where Old Man Extermination was. The entire world seemed to have been turned upside down. When he lifted his head, he could see the expanse cosmoses of Dark Dawn and Saint Defire above him. They continued overlapping with each other like two huge hands pressing against each other behind Su Ming to squeeze down on all existences. Signs of collapse and destruction also appeared in the fourth expanse cosmos. Planets roared and continents shattered. Su Ming saw quite a number of powerful warriors from the previous eons. They had originally lost their hearts as cultivators, but when the disaster descended upon them, they stared at the world, and a hint of reluctance to part with it, as well as relief, appeared on their faces. Su Ming saw those who were once fierce and fiendish lowering their heads to stare at the grass and flowers beneath them before they died. Their smiles were filled with sincerity and beauty, and they lasted until they shattered into nothingness. When a person was about to die, their words were kind. If even their words were like that, then their hearts were even more so. The destruction of the world also caused Su Ming's seemingly lost heart to be submerged in nothingness. Only the wind he had turned into remained. As it howled, Su Ming saw a figure. It was a tall figure. His built body was like a small hill, and he stood on a collapsing planet. That figure threw his head back and let out a forlorn laugh. As that laughter echoed in the air, it was filled with regret, a sigh, and a boldness that showed that he was not afraid of death. However, the forlorn and sorrow in that laugh was enough to affect the changes in the world. As it laughed, Su Ming saw the figure's face. It was Lai Shan Xiao, the first god of berserkers, Lai Shan Xiao. "I made the wrong bet, Su Ming, I made the wrong bet, but you must persevere." As Lai Shan Xiao laughed forlornly, he did not dodge the collapse of the planet under his feet. He simply allowed the ground to collapse and submerge him. When his body was devoured, the planet let out a bang, and everything within it shattered into pieces. They were reduced to ashes and turned into nothingness. Only the forlorn laughter seemed to echo in the destroyed galaxy. It turned into a lingering thought that refused to disappear even after a long time had passed. Su Ming watched the planet shatter, watched Lai Shan Xiao choose death. This person had died because he had made a wrong bet, because he felt guilty towards Su Ming, and because of the indescribable sadness born from the deaths of 100,000 berserkers. He could only die. In silence, the purple gust of wind that Su Ming had turned into appeared at the gap leading to the vast expanse. On the way there, he did not see Tian Xiezi, and neither did he sense his presence. It was as if Tian Xiezi had completely disappeared and did not leave behind even a hint of his presence. Su Ming did not see Tian Xiezi, but he saw the ancient ship and Old Man Extermination standing on it. This was not the first time Su Ming had seen this person's appearance. When he had gained an epiphany of boundless Dao realm, he had seen him with his Dao divinity, but now, Old Man Extermination's appearance had changed drastically. Nearly a tenth of his hair had turned black, and even his face had turned white. He looked as if he had become younger, and he was clearly different from the old people around him. Even his presence had become mixed up. It was as if there were two presences on him. The second might be slightly weaker, but it seemed to contain an indestructible will. No matter how Old Man Extermination tried to suppress it, he could not get rid of it. Su Ming was familiar with the second presence. It belonged to Lei Chun. The instant the purple gust of wind that Su Ming had turned into approached him, Old Man Extermination's eyes flew open, and a dark light shone in them as he looked at Su Ming. Eritread is someone worthy of respect. If he had not saved you, you would have become an offering, but it's fine. You will not be able to escape your fate, Old Man Extermination said faintly, then lifted his right hand and pointed at Su Ming. With it, the galaxy in front of Su Ming distorted and turned into an octagonal circle of light. At the instant it appeared, a destructive presence instantly swelled up. The space in the distance looked as if it had been forcefully torn apart by someone from the world outside. Once a huge crack appeared, Su Ming could see the vast expanse beyond the crack. He could also see a finger charging out from the vast expanse and pressing down on Su Ming. I've always been curious as to how you can decide who is an offering, Su Ming said languidly while staring at Old Man Extermination. He took a step forward, and when he touched the octagonal circle of light, a shocking bang shot up. The circle of light shattered, and in an instant, Su Ming took a step forward. At the instant he took that step, the finger came charging at him with a loud bang. It instantly replaced the space behind Su Ming and closed in on him. Su Ming did not dodge, and simply allowed the finger to touch his body. During that instant, Su Ming's body let out a bang and shattered to pieces. The finger shot through his body and charged at Old Man Extermination. This scene caused Old Man Extermination's expression to change. He formed a seal with his hands, and his Tao divinity manifested at the center of his brows. He cast some unknown divine ability, causing the finger to stop in front of him before it slowly retracted. Once it disappeared into space, a low voice came from the vast expanse beyond. "You are not prepared to be my offering." When those words appeared, Old Man Extermination's face turned pale. Just as he was about to speak, the spot where Su Ming's physical body had been destroyed distorted. The signs of destruction swiftly gathered together, and in the blink of an eye, Su Ming's body appeared, unharmed. This scene caused Old Man Extermination's pupils to shrink. At the same time, Detion's body dried up in the collapsed death vortex. When he coughed up blood, 8 overlapping pupils appeared in his eyes. At that moment, one of them had disappeared. Only 7 remained. The one that had disappeared was used to maintain the shattered life matrix gathering together again. As long as Detion did not die, Su Ming would definitely not die. Su Ming clearly knew this, which was why he had allowed the finger to close in on him and destroy his body. Once he reappeared, he took a step forward and charged at Old Man Extermination. "Who gave you the right to make me your offering?" Monstrous killing intent appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The purple hue in his pupils caused him to no longer look like a cultivator, but a ferocious spirit. His eyes shone with a dazzling light. At that moment, he took a step forward at a moderate pace, but an increasingly stronger presence erupted from his body with a bang. It was so strong that when Su Ming's foot landed, the collapse of the entire world seemed to have come to a halt for a moment. Old Man Extermination lifted his right hand again. With a ferocious smile, he formed a seal and pointed at Su Ming. "I refuse to believe that you have an endless supply of lives." With it, the octagonal rune appeared around Su Ming again. Soon after, Xianzhang's finger that could destroy everything appeared in the crack in the vast expanse in the distance. It charged towards Su Ming, and it was so quick that in the blink of an eye, it closed in on him with a bang. Su Ming's body crumbled again. The finger shot through him, and when it appeared in front of Old Man Extermination formed a seal with his hands and pointed at the center of his brows. Immediately, the finger stopped moving. When it pulled back, it disappeared. "Where is my offering?" This time, the low voice that came from beyond the crack was still as cold and merciless as ever. First chapter. Today, the 4th chapter erupted. It should have been a year since the 4th chapter erupted. My fellow Taoists, can you see my hard work? Can your monthly votes help me? Chapter 1494. Kill. There seems to be only slaughter left in my world. Only this sort of slaughter and the waves of heat caused by blood can let me know that I still exist. Kill. If I don't kill, then the world will think that I killed them. If I don't kill, then the resentment will continue to grow stronger. If I don't kill, then I will let down my heart, my Tao, and ninth summit. That's why I, Su Ming, can only kill. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. I don't want to think about it. At that moment, I feel as if my heart has lost its emptiness. The memories of the people of Ninth Summit before they were destroyed have turned into a madness that makes me lose my soul. Besides killing, what else can I do? Even if they are weaklings, and weaklings should not die, they deserve to die. If they had not confused me and blocked me with the resentment they gathered together, none of this should have happened. That's why they deserve to die. That's why, since they were certain that it was me, then I might as well pretend that it was me. Since they don't need me to explain myself, then I, Su Ming, will no longer explain myself to anyone. This is my Tao and my path. Those who understand me know my heart, and those who don't, what does their death have to do with me? Su Ming threw his head back and laughed loudly. His laughter was forlorn, and blood flowed down from the corners of his eyes, as if he wanted to spill his tears of blood on each expanse cosmos. Wherever he went, a bloody storm would follow. The worlds behind him overlapped, and the disaster descended behind him. Destruction appeared behind him, and he laughed ferociously. However, that ferocious laughter eventually turned into a roar, because before the disaster, Su Ming had already sent his own disaster to bathe the world in blood. He walked past Dark Dawn and Saint D Fire, and with the purple wind sweeping up the sea of blood, Su Ming rushed into the fourth expanse cosmos, descending from above. He tore through space and shot through the barrier of the expanse cosmos. At the instant he stepped into the fourth expanse cosmos, the endless booming sounds that belonged to the expanse cosmos echoed in his ears. However, when Su Ming heard them, he found them incredibly annoying. He had been in a brutal state to begin with, and at that moment his heart could not calm down, and his thoughts could not flow smoothly, which was why he threw his head back and roared. "Be quiet!" The world rumbled. Su Ming's voice instantly swept through the entire fourth expanse cosmos and filled the entire area. With his will, he changed the laws in the universe, causing the laws in the universe to instantly crumble. The loud bangs that had been echoing in the place for an eternity instantly shattered. It was as if the booming sounds were afraid of Su Ming. It was as if the endless, loud bangs had stopped trembling before Su Ming, causing the entire fourth expanse cosmos to instantly fall into dead silence. There were no more booming sounds. When everything fell silent, the purple gust that was Su Ming swept through the area and charged towards the gap leading to the vast expanse, where Old Man Extermination was. The entire world seemed to have been turned upside down. When he lifted his head, he could see the expanse cosmoses of Dark Dawn and Saint D Fire above him. They continued overlapping with each other like two huge hands pressing against each other behind Su Ming to squeeze down on all existences. Signs of collapse and destruction also appeared in the fourth expanse cosmos. Planets roared and continents shattered. Su Ming saw quite a number of powerful warriors from the previous eons. They had originally lost their hearts as cultivators, but when the disaster descended upon them, they stared at the world, and a hint of reluctance to part with it, as well as relief, appeared on their faces. Su Ming saw those who were once fierce and fiendish lowering their heads to stare at the grass and flowers beneath them before they died. Their lips curled up into a smile. There was sincerity and beauty in that smile, and it lasted until it shattered into nothingness. When a person was about to die, their words were kind. If even their words are like that, then their hearts were even more so. The destruction of the world also caused Su Ming's seemingly lost heart to be submerged in nothingness. Only the wind that he had turned into remained. As it howled, Su Ming saw a figure. It was a tall figure. His built body was like a small hill, and he stood on a collapsing planet. That figure threw his head back and let out a forlorn laugh. As that laughter echoed in the air, it was filled with regret a sigh, and a boldness that showed that he was not afraid of death. However, the forlorn and sorrow in that laugh was enough to affect the changes in the world. As it laughed, Su Ming saw the figure's face. It was Lai Shan Xiao, the first god of berserkers, Lai Shan Xiao. I made the wrong bet, Su Ming. I made the wrong bet, but you must persevere. As Lai Shan Xiao laughed forlornly, he did not dodge the collapse of the planet under his feet. He simply allowed the ground to collapse and submerge him. When his body was devoured, the planet let out a bang, and everything within it shattered into pieces. They were reduced to ashes and turned into nothingness. Only the forlorn laughter seemed to echo in the destroyed galaxy. It turned into a lingering thought that refused to disappear even after a long time had passed. Su Ming watched the planet shatter and Lai Shan Xiao choose death. He had died because he made the wrong bet, because he felt guilty towards Su Ming, and because of the indescribable sadness born from the deaths of 100,000 berserkers. The only thing he could do was to die. In silence, the purple gust of wind that Su Ming had turned into appeared at the gap leading to the vast expanse. On the way there, he did not see Tian Xiezi, and neither did he sense his presence. It was as if Tian Xiezi had completely disappeared and did not leave behind any trace of his presence. Su Ming did not see Tian Xiezi, but he saw the ancient ship and Old Man Extermination standing on it. It was not the first time Su Ming had seen this person's appearance. When he had gained an epiphany of boundless Tao realm, he had seen him with his Tao divinity, but now, Old Man Extermination's appearance had changed drastically. Nearly a tenth of his hair had turned black, and even his face had turned white. He looked as if he had become younger, and he was clearly different from the old people around him. Even his presence had become mixed up. It was as if there were two presences on him. The second might be slightly weaker, but it seemed to contain an indestructible will. No matter how Old Man Extermination tried to suppress it, it was difficult for him to chase it away. Su Ming was familiar with the second presence. It belonged to Lei Chun. The instant the purple gust of wind that was Su Ming closed in, Old Man Extermination's eyes flew open, and a dark light shone in them as he looked at Su Ming. Erytriad is someone worthy of respect. If he hadn't saved you, you would have become an offering, but it's fine. You won't be able to escape your fate, Old Man Extermination said faintly, then lifted his right hand and pointed at Su Ming. With it, the galaxy in front of Su Ming distorted and turned into an octagonal circle of light. At the instant it appeared, a destructive presence instantly swelled up. The space in the distance looked as if it had been forcefully torn apart by someone from the world outside. Once a huge crack appeared, Su Ming could see the vast expanse beyond the crack. He could also see a finger charging out from the vast expanse and pressing down on Su Ming. I've always been curious as to how you can decide who is an offering, Su Ming said languidly while staring at Old Man Extermination. He took a step forward, and when he touched the octagonal circle of light, a shocking bang shot up. The circle of light shattered, and in an instant, Su Ming took a step forward. At the instant he took that step, the finger came charging at him with a loud bang. It instantly replaced the space behind Su Ming and closed in on him. Su Ming did not dodge, and simply allowed the finger to touch his body. During that instant, Su Ming's body let out a bang and shattered to pieces. The finger shot through his body and charged at Old Man Extermination. This scene caused Old Man Extermination's expression to change. He formed a seal with his hands, and his Tao divinity manifested at the center of his brows. He cast some unknown divine ability, causing the finger to stop in front of him before it slowly retracted. Once it disappeared into space, a low voice came from the vast expanse beyond. "You aren't ready for my offering." When those words appeared, Old Man Extermination's face turned pale. Just as he was about to speak, the spot where Su Ming's physical body had been destroyed distorted. The signs of destruction swiftly gathered together, and in the blink of an eye, Su Ming's body appeared, completely unharmed. This scene caused Old Man Extermination's pupils to shrink. At the same time, Tian's body dried up in the collapsed Death Vortex. When he coughed up blood, 8 overlapping pupils appeared in his eyes. At that moment, one of them had disappeared. Only 7 remained. The one that had disappeared was used to maintain the shattered life matrix to gather together again. As long as Dition did not die, Su Ming would definitely not die. This was something Su Ming clearly knew, which was why he had allowed the finger to close in on him and destroy his body. Once he reappeared, he took a step forward and charged at Old Man Extermination. "Who gave you the right to make me your offering?" Monstrous killing intent appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The purple hue in his pupils caused him to no longer look like a cultivator, but a ferocious spirit. His eyes shone with a dazzling light. At that moment, he took a step forward at a moderate pace, but an increasingly stronger presence erupted from his body with a bang. It was so strong that when Su Ming's foot landed, the collapse of the entire world seemed to have come to a halt for a moment. Old Man Extermination lifted his right hand again. With a ferocious smile, he formed a seal and pointed at Su Ming. "I refuse to believe that you have an endless supply of lives." With it, the octagonal rune appeared around Su Ming again. Soon after, Xianzang's finger that could destroy everything appeared in the crack in the vast expanse in the distance. It charged towards Su Ming, and it was so quick that in the blink of an eye, it closed in on him with a bang. Su Ming's body crumbled again. The finger shot through him, and when it appeared in front of Old Man Extermination, he formed a seal with his hands and pointed at the center of his brows. Immediately, the finger stopped moving, and when it pulled back, it disappeared. "Where's my offering?" Chapter 1495. Inside Een Death Vortex, Dition's body trembled. As he stared at the life matrix above him that had collapsed once more, he let out a crazed roar. As he roared, 2 of the 6 remaining overlapping pupils in his eyes disappeared. At the instant the 2 overlapping pupils disappeared, the life force that erupted from them surged into the shattered life matrix, causing it to gather together once more as if it was flowing in reverse. "Su Ming, what are you doing?" Dition's eyes were bloodshot. He was maintaining the life matrix with great difficulty, but he knew that if this happened 2 more times, then even if he paid all the price, he would not be able to gather together a complete life matrix. At the same time, Su Ming's figure manifested for the 2nd time in front of Old Man Extermination. His eyes shone with a strange and enchanting light. There was a change in them, as if he was copying something. Xianzang is a dead life, or rather, he is about to die, and he no longer has any sense of sight. He cannot see anything. When Su Ming spoke, he took another step forward. He was already less than 1,000 feet away from Old Man Extermination. When Old Man Extermination heard Su Ming's words, his expression remained the same, but his heart let out a loud thump. Then how did he determine just who is the offering? Is it this? As Su Ming spoke, he lifted his right hand and swung it at the air. Immediately, an octagonal rune appeared on his palm. The rune was the exact same as the one Old Man Extermination had cast to descend on Su Ming. Su Ming had not died twice because he was courting death, but because he wanted to find a way to kill Old Man Extermination. He wanted to know why he had been chosen as an offering and why Arid Triad was so certain that Xianzang was already dead. Since things had already progressed to this stage, since the world was destroyed, since Harmonious Morris Alba was dead, since Su Ming no longer had anything that he could not afford to lose, then there was no reason for him to act crazily once more. During the 2 deaths, Su Ming could tell that Xianzang had no sense of sight. During the 2 deaths, Su Ming had copied the rune that was clearly used to locate Xianzang and tell him who the offering was. At the instant Su Ming swung his right hand and the rune appeared, Old Man Extermination's expression changed drastically. He stood up swiftly, and his pupils shrank. He had not expected that the strongest cultivator he had met in Harmonious Morris Alba would be much stronger than the people he had met in the other Harmonious Morris Alba expanse cosmoses. Understanding a hint of boundless Tao realm had already shocked him, but now, Su Ming had actually managed to copy his rune in just 2 short moments of death. This sort of potential was already enough to make him a monstrous genius. At the instant he stood up, Old Man Extermination lifted his right hand without any hesitation and pointed at Su Ming. With it, the octagonal rune appeared around Su Ming for the third time. But the moment it did so, Su Ming pointed at Old Man Extermination with his right hand in the direction of the distant Old Man Extermination. At the instant Old Man Extermination's expression turned dark, a huge octagonal rune appeared around him as well. The two runes were exactly the same. There was not a single hint of difference between them. They were locating runes that would guide Xianzong to harvest the offering. Almost at the instant the two runes appeared, Xianzang's finger appeared in the torn space in the vast expanse. Once it descended in the expanse cosmos, it paused for a moment, but only for a moment before it split into two. One charged at Su Ming, and the other charged at Old Man Extermination. Booming sounds shook the sky and earth at that moment. Once Su Ming's body touched the finger, he was instantly destroyed, but at the instant he was destroyed, his eyes burned brightly. He stared at Old Man Extermination and saw him forming a seal with his hands. Once he pushed them at the center of his brow, Xianzang's finger touched the octagonal rune around Old Man Extermination. Boom! The rune crumbled, and Old Man Extermination coughed up a mouthful of blood. Once he let out a shocking roar. The finger shot through the ancient ship and stopped 5 feet away from Old Man Extermination. It gradually retracted and disappeared into space. The finger might have disappeared, but Old Man Extermination's ancient ship shattered layer by layer and crumbled. Without the ancient ship, Old Man Extermination took a few steps back while standing in the galaxy. When he coughed up another mouthful of blood, Su Ming's body manifested for the third time. This time, Dition had paid the price of 4 overlapping pupils in Een Death Vortex. He had paid the price of 4 people's life, force, and souls. Now, all that was left was the portion that belonged to Dition. Abyss Builders, as expected of the Abyss Builders I created. Su Xian schemed against me and his son to possess me, and he succeeded. I admire him for that. As for you, you managed to copy my divine abilities within a short period of time. Abyss Builders, you are indeed a race that should not exist. Old Man Extermination threw his head back and laughed. There was aloofness in his laughter, along with killing intent directed towards Su Ming. But no matter how much you copy, you won't be able to learn an art that can make Xianzong not attack. If you can't learn this art, then you are destined to be an offering. My master's name is Tian Xiezi, Su Ming said faintly. As he spoke, he lifted his right hand, and the octagonal rune appeared. The first divine ability he taught me is to copy with a calm mind. Su Ming closed his eyes, and when he reopened them an instant later, a profound look appeared in his eyes. Within that profound look was a crazed flame. You said that I am an offering, and today I will say that you are the offering. Since we are both offerings, then let Xianzong consider. Who is the true offering? Su Ming lifted his right hand, and the octagonal rune on his palm shone with a dazzling light. Old Man Extermination's expression was grave, which had never been seen before. It was just as he said. Su Ming was the strongest cultivator among the several harmonious Morris Albas he had met. In fact, if he was the slightest bit careless, there was a high possibility that he would die. He had to fight with everything he had. He lifted his right hand as well, and the octagonal rune appeared. It shone with a brilliant light that did not lose to Su Ming's offering. At the instant Old Man Extermination spoke, he lowered his right hand and pointed at Su Ming. At the same time, Su Ming also brought his right hand down and pointed at Extermination. Their bodies seemed to have frozen up at that instant. The octagonal rune appeared around them at the same time. At the same time, Xianzang's fingers harvesting the offerings appeared beyond the crack in space, beyond the vast expanse. What appeared this time were still 2 fingers. With a destructive force that could not be resisted, they charged at Su Ming and Old Man Extermination. At the instant they closed in, Old Man Extermination formed a seal with his hands, then lifted them and pushed at the center of his brows. As for Su Ming, the light of divination shone in his eyes. He did not copy extermination's actions. There was a falsehood contained in it, and if he really tried to copy it, the consequences would be obvious. Su Ming's eyes shone. When a third eye at the center of his brows opened, the Tao divinity in it also opened its eyes. At the same time, Su Ming's presence changed completely. The hint of boundless Tao realm's presence filled his body in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the Tao divinity in his third eye formed a seal with its hands and disappeared. It fused with Su Ming's body and instantly fused with him. This was the divine ability Su Ming had learned from Old Man Extermination, the art that could prevent Xianzong from attacking. Almost at the instant Su Ming's Tao divinity fused with his body, the incoming finger stopped 5 feet behind Su Ming after destroying the octagonal rune. The same scene instantly appeared in Old Man Extermination's place. Disbelief appeared in Old Man Extermination's eyes. He had pondered over this divine ability and art for countless years, and he had only come to understand it after verifying it multiple times. Yet right then, Su Ming had managed to copy it in just a short amount of time. This caused Old Man Extermination's heart to instantly turn cold. This is impossible. It can't be like this. Old Man Extermination's hair was a mess, and there was blood at the corners of his mouth. Madness appeared in his eyes. A life-threatening danger descended on him at that moment, and it was a feeling he had not felt for a long time. It was as if he had returned to the first time he met Xianzong, and he trembled as if his life was about to be wiped off at any moment. Xianzang's 2 fingers did not move. If Xianzong had a spirit, he might be thinking about it at that moment. If he did not have a spirit, then it would depend on who between Su Ming and Extermination would reveal a weakness that was destined to be the offering. Xianzong, he's the offering. I'm offering him to you. He's the most suitable offering in all the eons of harmonious Morris Alba. Old Man Extermination immediately roared. When his voice echoed in space, Su Ming's expression was aloof, and a powerful hint of killing intent as well as hatred appeared in his eyes. It was this person who changed everything. Lei Chun, what are you waiting for? Su Ming asked slowly. At the instant Su Ming said those words, Old Man Extermination's expression changed. At the same time, a sigh came from his body. Once it did so, the Tao divinity art Old Man Extermination had used to make Xianzang's fingers stop moving immediately started trembling. A clear hint of struggle appeared on the Tao divinity. It was usually useless, and Old Man Extermination could suppress it with just one thought. But now, at the instant the Tao divinity seemed to be struggling, the finger in front of Old Man Extermination moved. Despair appeared on Old Man Extermination's face, and he screamed shrilly. The finger touched Old Man Extermination's body with a bang. During that instant, Su Ming saw Old Man Extermination's body crumble. As his flesh and blood turned into a bloody mess, his nascent divinity was forcefully extracted. It had 2 heads. One of them was his, and the other was Lei Chen's. Their bodies seemed to have overlapped with each other, and at that moment, when it was extracted, it was immediately absorbed by the finger. I've sent the 2nd update, and there's still the 3rd and the 4th. Please get monthly votes. The 4th update will explode, and we can't afford to lose monthly votes. Chapter 1496. Becoming an offering doesn't mean that you will die, but that you will be reborn. Su Ming, since you gave up on this chance, it will be difficult for you to escape the cycle of reincarnation. I will wait for you here. This is just the beginning of our battle. It's far from over. I will definitely make you pay for this. At the instant he was absorbed by the finger, Old Man Extermination's nascent divinity looked at Su Ming, and hatred and madness that was carved into his bones appeared on his face. As he laughed ferociously, his words echoed in space. When his nascent divinity was completely absorbed by the finger disappeared. The entire 4th expanse, cosmos, crumbled. It continued shattering, and booming sounds rang in the air, causing everything in it to be destroyed in the blink of an eye. Su Ming was silent. He stared at the destruction around him, then turned into a long arc that charged towards the gap in a vast expanse. In an instant, he rushed out of his homeland. For the first time in the vast expanse, Su Ming saw the huge feng shui compass. It was boundless, and Su Ming could not see its end with his eyes. There was also the withered harmonious Morris alba under the feng shui compass, which was continuously being absorbed. Su Ming saw the 4 overlapping wings of harmonious Morris alba, which looked like they were being burned by invisible flames and were swiftly being reduced to ashes. Vaguely, he seemed to see arid triads expanse cosmos and hear arid triads murmurs. Tree, in this life, I will accompany you. Arid triad disappeared. Even the 4 great true worlds in it, divine essence star ocean, and everything else turned into destroyed nothingness before Su Ming's eyes. The past and his memories became a distant memory from then on. Dark Mountain, the 9th summit, the land of berserkers, true morning Tao world, and everything else were like fleeting clouds. They gradually faded away and only remained in his mind, becoming a burden and a memory that could accompany him as he continued walking alone in the vast expanse. Loneliness seemed to have never left Su Ming. Ever since he arrived in Dark Mountain, he was like a pot of old wine. When he drank with the moon, he could only clink his cup against the shadow. The wind of time and the quicksand that was stirred up no longer filled the depths of midnight. It was the world where he meditated in a daze. The figures seemed to have come closer, and the beautiful murmurs in his ears in the past were the desolate echoes of harmonious Morris alba's destruction. He did not know whether the glorious past he saw when he turned his head back thousands of years ago would last for tens of thousands of years and turn into the praises of his descendants. But as harmonious Morris alba gradually withered, perhaps the legend would no longer exist. It was as if yesterday's singing had lost its resonance and connection. The murmuring could no longer find the sound of a zither to listen to. Watching the rise and fall of the world might seem like an extravagant dream to an outsider. It might seem beautiful, but only those who truly experienced it would understand the pain that outsiders couldn't understand. Tears fell from the corners of Su Ming's eyes. He was the only person left in the world. When his tears fell, no one could see them, much less ask about them. Only harmonious Morris alba, which was slowly withering away until it turned into wisps of aura that were completely absorbed by the feng shui compass, saw Su Ming's lonely figure in the vast universe with its lifeless eyes before it died. That figure was desolate. Harmonious Morris alba disappeared without a sound. There were no loud booms that shook the sky and earth, and neither were there any forlorn screams that shocked the entire world. There was only a life and death that left no traces behind, a dream that woke up from a deep sleep. Su Ming was silent. There were still many things he had not done. He still had the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe's remnant in his storage bag, along with Yu Xian's sleeping body in the other world. All of them had become Su Ming's most precious memories. Fortunately, he still had the bald crane. The bald crane had appeared beside Su Ming at some unknown point of time. It accompanied him to watch harmonious Morris alba's destruction and the endless vast expanse with him. Then, a cold and dark voice came from the feng shui compass. 7th, reversed spirit. At the instant the voice echoed in the air, the feng shui compass let out a loud roar and started spinning swiftly. It did not spin quickly, but it formed an astonishing vortex. When it swept through the vast expanse, the black-robed young man, sitting on the feng shui compass, appeared before Su Ming's eyes for the first time in every sense of the word. He was dressed in black robes, and his body was so big that it was difficult to imagine. His lifeless eyes seemed to contain a merciless aloofness, but in truth, it was due to a thick aura of death surrounding him. His cold and dark face seemed to have never changed for a long time as he stared at Su Ming. He had no gaze, but at that moment, Su Ming could clearly sense Xian Zhang's gaze on him. More accurately speaking, Xian Zhang was not staring at Su Ming, but at the bald crane beside him. During that instant, the bald crane shuddered. When it lifted its head, it stared at Xian Zhang on the feng shui compass. A strong feeling that it was facing its mortal enemy surged in its heart. It was also at that moment that Su Ming saw the string of pearls in Xianzang's right hand. The pearl he held was shining with a dark light, and in it, Su Ming saw the shadow of a crane. That shadow was naturally the bald crane. At the instant Su Ming saw the pearl clearly, his pupils shrank. At that moment, Xianzang slowly lifted his right hand while on the feng shui compass. With the pearl in his hand, he slowly extended it in Su Ming's direction, as if he was seizing space. With it, the vast universe within a circular area of tens of thousands of lis around Su Ming let out a shocking roar. It was as if the universe was collapsing and tumbling backwards. A violent gust of wind so powerful that it caused Su Ming's robes and hair to flutter instantly appeared. Soon after, Su Ming saw the world in front of him turn into a huge palm, and with a presence that threw the entire universe into chaos, it came charging at him. The bald crane shuddered, and Su Ming's eyes turned bloodshot. During that instant, he swung his arm and swept up the bald crane before sending it into his storage bag. Then, he turned into a long arc and swiftly retreated. But no matter how fast he was, he could not outrun the palm that seemed to be able to replace the vast universe. The palm instantly closed in on him, and when it opened its mouth, it swiftly seized Su Ming. Su Ming threw his head back and let out a low growl. He lifted his hands and formed a seal. Immediately, his Tao divinity appeared and covered his entire body, but the method he used to make Xianzang's finger stop was completely useless at that moment. Xianzang's right hand had already closed in on him. Su Ming's pupils shrank. The presence of his Tao divinity did not spread out. Instead, it gathered around him. He lifted his right hand, and at the instant he clenched his fist, his body immediately swelled up. It was the god of berserker's transformation. In an instant, Su Ming grew to nearly 1,000 feet tall. With his full power gathered, he delivered his strongest strike against the incoming palm. Boom! The vast universe trembled violently at that instant. Su Ming shuddered, and he tumbled backwards like a kite with its string snapped. He coughed up 7 mouthfuls of blood, and his body shattered. The legs he had regathered shattered, and his left arm disappeared once more. Only half of his body remained, and at that moment, his presence seemed to have become incredibly weak. When he moved back, madness that refused to admit defeat showed up in his eyes, but he could not stop his body from moving back. The difference between him and Xianzang was simply too great. There was no way he could fight against him. When he moved back, Su Ming threw his head back and roared. Purple smoke immediately filled his entire body. At the instant he stopped moving, Xianzang's right hand closed in on him again. This time, the bald crane's figure shone even more brilliantly in the pearl he held in his right hand. "Give the 7th reverse spirit to me. You can leave." Xianzang's cold and dark voice echoed in the vast universe as he seized Su Ming with his hand, but what answered him was Su Ming's laughter and fearless madness. He wanted to possess Xianzang. Even if it looked like he was throwing an egg at a rock, Su Ming knew that if he did not possess Xianzang now, there was a high possibility that he would no longer have the chance. Even if there was a disparity between their states of life, and the possibility of Su Ming succeeding in such a possession was next to none, as long as there was a sliver of hope, he had to try, because only by doing so could he protect the bald crane at that moment. He absolutely could not watch the bald crane end up like a member of the 9th Summit. Even if Su Ming knew that Xianzang wanted the bald crane at that moment, and if he gave up on the bald crane and left on his own, he would no longer have to face the disaster of life and death. He could leave this place, stay far away from Xianzang, and live in the vast universe. In fact, he could search for another harmonious Morris Alba, just like Old Man Extermination, and enter its body so that he could have more time to gain an epiphany and understand more of boundless Tao Realm's presence. In fact, with his current level of cultivation, he could possess a harmonious Morris Alba so that he could become stronger, and once that harmonious Morris Alba died, he could choose an offering just like Old Man Extermination had done and carry out a cooperation with Xianzang, just like Old Man Extermination had done. Because of it, He could continue existing until he searched for another harmonious Morris Alba. One day, when Su Ming completely stepped into boundless Dao realm, he would be able to fight to the death against Xianzong. To Su Ming, this was the path he should choose logically. Only by doing so would his chances of success increase slightly. But if he had to give up on the bald crane as the price, Su Ming was unwilling to do so. He could not give up on any of his friends. If he could give up on the bald crane today, and the reason for that was to give up on a life, he could have a chance to resurrect all his people. But if some time passed and Su Ming still had to give up on the bald crane, what would he choose? Su Ming would not choose that sort of life. Give up. This word had never appeared in Su Ming's life before, and it would definitely not appear in the future either. I will absolutely not give up. Resolve appeared in Su Ming's eyes, but at that moment, an even crazier resolve erupted from the bald crane in his storage bag. The third chapter was delivered, and it had lasted for 7 consecutive days. On the 7th day, it was still the 4th chapter. Am I really at the top of the monthly votes? Chapter 1497. You don't want to give up, you don't want to leave me behind and live alone. Then how can I let you risk everything for me and cut off the possibility of a future? The madness of a life erupted from Su Ming's storage bag at that instant. With a bang, the storage bag opened on its own, and the bald crane instantly flew out. There was no longer a hint of filth on its face, nor was there any obsession towards crystals. Instead, it stared at Su Ming. There was a reluctance to part in its gaze, along with the friendship and companionship that had lasted for thousands of years. I don't want to lose my memories again. I don't want to forget my home and my best friends once I lose them. The bald crane sighed softly. Along with it flew out of the storage bag was a mangled corpse. That corpse was the bald crane's physical body. It was a physical body that it had not wanted to fuse with in the past because it knew that once it did so, it would perhaps forget its memories of this life. It would no longer be the bald crane, but an unfamiliar Kong M.O. The unfamiliar Kong M.O. would no longer possess the bald crane's personality. It would become a true stranger, which was why the bald crane did not want to fuse with it. It did not want to do so from the bottom of its heart, because it was very satisfied with its current form and its current life. In fact, it had a vague feeling that it was the happiest in its life as the bald crane. Yet now, since Su Ming could do this for it, then the bald crane could also fuse with its physical body for Su Ming. It would not have Su Ming risk his life to possess it, but would fight against Xianzong with its fused body and give Su Ming a chance to leave this place. Su Ming, this is my choice. The bald crane let out a low growl. At the instant Su Ming looked over, it chose to fuse with his physical body. If there comes a day when you still remember me, and I still remember you, I will come and search for you. Its physical body instantly fused with the bald crane. As its physical body squirmed, the bald crane let out a shrill scream of pain. As it screamed, its body was no longer bare, but was covered in black feathers. Its presence instantly increased exponentially, and once it reached an astonishing presence, a 7-colored light erupted from the bald crane's body. I like 7-colored light. The bald crane threw its head back and let out a shrill roar. Its eyes instantly turned aloof, and its presence instantly turned cold. At that moment, it was no longer the bald crane, but Kong M.O. I am Kong M.O. The bald crane lifted its head and let out a shocking roar. With the remnant will in its head, it charged towards Xianzang's incoming right hand. As it moved forward, its eyes instantly turned red, and a crazed aura erupted from it. Its roar shook the heavens and earth, and an ancient and indifferent voice came from it. I am not Kong M.O. either. I am the 7th reverse spirit. The same shade of red appeared in Su Ming's eyes. At that moment, he did not hesitate. His life started burning, and it was not just his body that was burning. His soul, his Tao divinity, and his will were also burning. With my burning will, I will open the gate to the void in the world once more. I will form the river once more and name it the river of forgetfulness. I will reconstruct the expanse cosmos and open up the void of another expanse cosmos. Su Ming swung his arm. As his voice echoed in the air, with the burning of his life, he lifted his right hand and pointed at the space behind him. Su Ming's will erupted completely at that instant. When he pointed forward, a huge vortex appeared behind him. As it rotated with loud rumbles, a world was revealed. Almost at the instant, Su Ming's other world was reactivated, and even he did not know whether there was still a connection between it and the severed river of forgetfulness. The bald crane's body crashed into Xianzhang's palm. Booming sounds instantly echoed in the vast universe. At the instant the palm froze, the bald crane let out a shrill scream of pain. Its body exploded with a bang, and as it was reduced to a bloody mess, it tumbled backwards. But at that moment, a dazzling light erupted from the seventh pearl on the palm. It turned into an astonishing suction force that enveloped the bloody and battered bald crane, intending to suck its body into the pearl. Su Ming lifted his head and burned his entire body to its peak. With a single move, he instantly appeared beside the bald crane and grabbed its body to help it fight against the suction force, even if it instantly made Su Ming feel as if his entire body was about to be torn apart. A large number of cracks appeared on his skin, and blood filled his body. The intense pain caused the burning in his body to become even stronger, but he still used his own body to fight against the suction force in place of the bald crane. With the will to bid farewell and a hint of reluctance to part, he no longer hesitated. He swiftly brought out his full strength and flung the bald crane toward the other world in the vortex he had activated. With his own body, he fought against the suction force from the pearl and burned himself to release his strongest power at that moment to send his brothers, his friends, and the companion who had accompanied him for thousands of years to the other world. The bald crane's eyes seemed to become clouded at that instant, as if its memories had become chaotic. It seemed to have remembered some things from the past. In those memories, there was a person smiling before it. He stretched out his hand before it, and he brought it through thousands of years and worlds. That person, what was his name? I forgot. I can't remember it. Even his face has become indistinct. Who am I? The bald crane's eyes gradually closed. As Su Ming burned everything in his life, he flung it into the vortex and into the other world. If there comes a day when you remember me and I remember you, I will come and search for you. Su Ming watched the bald crane leave into the distance, watched its body disappear into the vortex, watched it disappear, and a smile appeared on his face. He saw a black feather float out of the whirlpool after it disappeared. It landed in front of him and landed in his palm. Why did I run into you again? Damn it, why you? Why are you always following me? Let me tell you, your Grandpa Crane is amazing. Oh well, I won't make things difficult for you. Why aren't you leaving? Can't you sense my powerful presence? Crystals? Darn all, I'm going to risk it all. I have so many crystals. I'm going to risk it all. Su Ming, damn it. You can't close your eyes. You can't die. You coward, you can't die. Su Ming, I want to cry. Su Ming clenched his fist and held the feather in his palm. At that moment, his body was swiftly tumbling backwards due to the suction force, charging towards the gigantic palm. Cracks started appearing on Su Ming's body during this process. His body gradually turned into a bloody mess, but resolve appeared in his eyes, along with a hint of madness that made it seem as if he did not care about the world. At the instant he closed in on the palm, even if his body was about to crumble, he still forced himself to turn around. When he saw the palm closing in on him endlessly, a resolve to live appeared in his eyes. Abyss Builder. Possession. Boom! Su Ming's body shattered completely. As his flesh and blood splattered everywhere, the huge palm seized all traces of him. When the palm disappeared, the black-robed young man, sitting on the feng shui compass, lowered his hand with an apathetic expression on his face. It was as if he had seen the bald crane leave, but not a single change in his emotions could be detected. It was as if he had never possessed any emotions to begin with. Since the seventh reverse spirit was gone, then so be it. He gradually lowered his head and closed his eyes, as if he had sunk into deep sleep. He simply allowed the feng shui compass to swim about in the vast universe, as if he did not know where it was headed. Eventually, he fell into a deep slumber. No one noticed, nor was it possible for anyone to notice, that a black feather had appeared in the palm of his right hand. His action of holding the feather was the exact same as Su Ming's action of holding his resolve. The 6th volume, Arid Triad's Disaster, had ended. Tomorrow, it would be the 7th volume of Devil Seeking. How many cycles of reincarnation would there be one less person? Chapter 1498. The mountain was Green Mountain, and the tower beyond the building. The water was white water beyond the sky. The sky was blue, and white clouds adorned it. When Su Ming looked over, the sky seemed to have turned into a beautiful painting. If it was not because wind blew past, the clouds would seem to have drifted into the distance slowly, causing the painting to not be still, but to turn into a world. Su Ming stared at the sky in a daze. He had been awake for a month, and during it, he might have accepted the reality around him, but he still could not understand just where he was. He still remembered the final scene of him possessing Xianzong. Due to the difference in their states of being, the possibility of him successfully possessing Xianzong was next to none. However, at the instant Su Ming possessed Xianzong, he had burned his life and soul to the peak, which was why it was not impossible for him to possess Xianzong. However, if he succeeded, why was he not Xianzong? If he failed, where was he now? Also, Su Ming lowered his head to look at his body and fell silent. Xianair, you're daydreaming again. A stern voice came from beside Su Ming. It belonged to an old man with an awe-inspiring expression and a head full of white hair. He was dressed in a long gray robe and had a straw hat on his head. In his hand, he held a wooden staff as he turned his head around to look at Su Ming. Master! Su Ming stared at the old man before him. He might have been awake for a month, but every single time he saw this person, his heart would tremble, and he would not know whether everything before him was real or fake. The old man was Tian Xiezi. He looked exactly the same. Even his voice rose and fell, just like the voice in Su Ming's memories. He could not differentiate between the past and the present. This is just the first month. You must remember that you will have a total of 6,000 years. You will have 10 cycles of 60 years with me. You will walk through mountains, rivers, and plains with me. You will watch the sun rise and set again and again. You will understand the changes of the 4 seasons and understand the principles of the world. You will search for the truth and search for the kindness in human nature. Then, during the 90 cycles of 60 years, you will wander about alone. Only by doing so will you have the right to fight against your eldest brother and second brother. Only then will you have the chance to become the future ruler, and I will not have to fulfill what your father asked of me, the old man said faintly. He knocked the wooden staff against the ground, turned his head around, and continued walking forward. Follow me. His voice was ancient as it echoed through the mountain range. It seemed to fuse with the mountain wind, transforming into clouds that were gradually growing darker and darker until they turned into snowflakes. It was winter. Su Ming followed behind the old man quietly. When he walked through the mountain and passed by a lake that was not sealed in ice, the setting sun in the distance shone on the land with its afterglow, casting Su Ming's shadow on the lake. It was a young man, a handsome young man wearing a long gray robe and a bamboo hat. However, there was a hint of confusion on his face. He was the 3rd prince of Guzong, and he had 2 royal brothers. There was a tradition in Guzong. Every time there was a change of royal power, all the princes would be taken away by cultivators personally appointed by the king to travel for 6,000 years. After 100 cycles of 60 years, the princes would return and begin a fight for the throne. It was destined that only one prince would survive. The blood of the others who died would be used to forge his crown, and he would become the ruler of the country. And that country was known as Guzong. It was the ruler of the entire land and the supreme ruler of the entire world. It stood above all cultivators and all sects. At that moment, Besides the memories Su Ming already had, there was an additional memory that had been branded into the depths of his soul at some unknown point of time. It was as if it had always belonged to him. However, he could not remember his eldest brother's name, and neither could he remember his second brother's appearance. The thing that left the deepest impression in his memory was that he had to follow the old man in front of him for 10 cycles of 60 years. Drink. The old man stopped by the lake and turned his head around to cast a glance at Su Ming before pointing at the lake. The lake's water does not move, and it will reflect the sky. If you drink this water, it will be as if you have swallowed a corner of the sky. This lake is known as Sky Lake. As the old man spoke, he bent his back and extended his hand to scoop up a palm's worth of lake water. He brought it to his lips and drank from it. Su Ming was silent. His gaze fell on the lake, but he did not bend his back. The old man lifted his head and looked at Su Ming. Why should I drink this lake's water? Even if it reflects the sky, and you think that drinking it will be as if you have swallowed a corner of the sky, you will only be lying to yourself, Su Ming said slowly while shaking his head. Lift your head and look at the sky in the distance, the old man said calmly. Su Ming lifted his head. At the instant he looked at the sky, his pupils suddenly shrank. He saw a small region in the sky in the distance, and it looked as if it had been devoured. I don't know what this lake's original name was, but when I passed by it and said that it was the sky, then it was the sky. When I drank the lake's water and said that I had swallowed a corner of the sky, then it was as if I had swallowed a corner of the sky. If you persist in this, then you will sink into karma, the old man said faintly. Su Ming was silent. After a long while, he suddenly laughed. Why was there a need to care about karma? Why was there a need to care about where he was? Why was there a need to be so fixated on an answer? As long as he walked down the path, everything would be fine. I have learned my lesson. Su Ming wrapped his fist in his palm. Once he bowed toward the old man, he bent his back and squatted down. He lifted his right hand and placed it in the lake, but he did not fish it out. Instead, a dark light shone in his eyes, and he lightly patted the surface of the lake with his right hand. At the instant he did so, the lake immediately roared and tumbled about. Waves spread out endlessly, causing the sky that was originally reflected to shatter and disappear without a trace. Why is that? The old man frowned. Master, you said that it is the sky, so if you drink it, you will be swallowing the sky. I said that it is not the sky, so there is no need for me to drink it. Su Ming stood up and looked at the old man. You're quite ambitious. A brief flash of praise appeared in the old man's eyes, but soon a fierce glare appeared in his eyes, and his words instantly changed. But your logic doesn't make sense, and you're a little too arrogant. I said that this lake is the sky because I sensed something when I saw the sky reflected in the lake, which is why I said those words in accordance with the will of heaven, which is why I can truly swallow the sky. All of this is the will of heaven, and I am just going with the flow. But you messed up the lake, and it is as if you messed up fate. But before long, the lake will still calm down, and it will still reflect the sky. To it, you're just a passerby. To you, you are smug and laughing at the lake for messing up the world, but to the lake, it is also laughing at you. If you don't believe me, look at the lake and see whether it is still calm. If you laugh at the calm surface of the lake, can you also see that it is laughing at you in the reflection? The old man said calmly. His words were spoken slowly, but they seemed to contain the great Tao within them. I don't believe in fate. Su Ming did not turn his head back, but at the instant the lake behind him calmed down after tumbling about, a large amount of water vapor appeared. It instantly turned into fog. Once it enveloped the entire lake, it only lasted for about a dozen breaths before Su Ming swung his arm with his back turned towards the lake. Wind immediately blew past. Once it scattered the fog, the lake water had completely dried up and disappeared. Only the ugly mud in the depression was left, along with the countless fishes, prawns, and lives in it. Now it's completely gone, Su Ming said faintly. The old man was silent. He cast Su Ming a deep glance, then shook his head. The bloodline of ancient Zhang's royal family is the strongest in the world. This rumor is indeed true. Let's go. We still have a long way to go. The old man turned around and no longer looked at the lake. He walked forward. Su Ming lowered his head. He did not look at the lake either. He just followed the old man and walked forward. In Su Ming's eyes, it did not matter whether it was the goal or the end of the path. It was a path to search for Tao, a path that would allow him to become even stronger. He had walked through mountains, rivers for seasons, and 10 years. The old man walked in front, and Su Ming walked behind him. 10 years ago, Su Ming's reflection in the lake water had been that of a teenager. Right then, he had already become a young man. He took bigger steps forward, and the dazed look in the past could no longer be seen on his face. Instead, it had returned to the calmness he had when he was in harmonious Morris Alba. The night sky was dotted with stars. A bonfire burned on the ground. Su Ming sat beside it, and across from him was the old man who looked like Tian Xiezi. On another snowy day, 10 years later, the two of them sat cross-legged and sensed the cold behind them, as well as the waves of heat crashing into their faces. The old man had his eyes closed, as if he was immersed in his training. He did not care about the changes in the world around him. Su Ming lifted his head and stared at the indistinct moon hanging behind the countless snowflakes in the sky that looked like dust. The moon was always around, but the person was not. Su Ming quietly thought about the past and counted his memories. Over there, he searched for the sighing ferryman in his own world. How many famous sects and clans are there in ancient Zong? An ancient voice tumbled out of the old man's mouth slowly. It was mixed with the snow and wind, fused with the crackling sounds of the bonfire, and reached Su Ming's ears. 7 sects and 12 clans, Su Ming said calmly while still staring at the indistinct moon. What is the difference between sects and clans? The old man asked slowly. Sects and clans exist in the endless emptiness. They are sealed by ancient depository, and their clans come from the vast emptiness. They do not receive teachings. What happens every single time the imperial power changes? The old man asked. Su Ming averted his gaze from the indistinct moon in the sky and stared at the burning bonfire. The 7 sects move, and the 12 clans fall into chaos. The battle for the imperial power changes the world. I've told you about the limits of cultivation in the boundless world over the past 10 years. Do you still remember them? The old man asked faintly. Attaining completion in Avicania realm means gaining an epiphany of boundless Tao realm and obtaining the descent of Tao divinity. If you gain an epiphany 9 times, you will be like having 9 overlapping Tao divinities. 9 is the limit, and once you reach it, you can break through and step into boundless Tao realm. Those who have attained boundless Tao have never appeared since ancient times, which is why the people of the world can understand Tao, but they cannot understand what boundless Tao is pointing at, Su Ming said calmly. Su Ming asked calmly. The old man had told Su Ming about these things bit by bit during the 10 years he had been here. Volume 7, Chapter 1. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, my fellow Taoists. Thank you for allowing my 7-day explosion to reach another level. Please wait for me. 3 days later, I will return with another crazed explosion. Chapter 1499. Out of the 9 levels of Tao Divinity Realm, 3 of them are Tao Spirit Realm, 6 of them are Tao Immortal Realm, and 8 of them are the Peak. They are known as Great Tao Paragons, and 9 of them are Tao Divinities. There are only 3 Tao Divinities in the world, and they have existed for eternity. The 3 of them have never been destroyed, and there has never been a 4th. Naturally, there has never been a true boundless Tao realm. The old man stared at Su Ming, and his voice lingered for a long time in the wind and snow. Never? Su Ming suddenly asked. Yes. The old man smiled. There was a hint of age in his smile, as if his life was about to come to an end, but in the next breath, it looked as if his life had just begun. He did not continue the topic. Instead, he stared at Su Ming, and a gratified look gradually appeared in his eyes. You can now travel on your own. You need to change your appearance. You will no longer be called Xian. You will change your name and join a sect. No one will know that you are a prince. Only 6,000 years later, Will you remember to come back to the city of ancient Zong? And I will wait for you outside the city gates at that time. At the instant you step through the city gates, I will teach you your final lesson." The old man smiled and stood up. Once he cast Su Ming a deep glance. He turned around with a smile and walked into the wind and snow. Su Ming watched the old man leave into the distance. When his figure became indistinct, he asked softly, "Master, what is your name in this life? You already have the answer in your heart." The old man's voice came from the wind and snow, lingering for a long time. This answer had appeared in Su Ming's mind when he first saw the old man, when he woke up 10 years ago. Tian Xiezi. It did not matter who he was in this life or in this expanse cosmos. In Su Ming's heart, he was Tian Xiezi. Due to old man extermination's interference, Su Ming's ninth change of heart had been thrown into chaos, and he had been entangled with him until harmonious Morris Alba was destroyed. In the fourth expanse cosmos, Su Ming saw Lai Shan Xiu laughing shrilly and choosing to destroy himself, but he did not see Tian Xiezi. He did not sense even a hint of his presence. Right then, Su Ming understood, but when he thought about it carefully, he still did not seem to understand. It wasn't important whether he understood or not. What was important was that the path was under his feet. He had to walk down it until the day he understood it. Step by step in this process, when he looked back one day, he would be able to see the beauty of seeking truth. Su Ming smiled. A smile appeared on his face as he stared at the candle flame. He could vaguely see the scenes, faces, and memories of the past in harmonious Morris Alba's expanse cosmos. It doesn't matter whether this world is real or just an illusion. Master gave me the answer 10 years ago, Su Ming said softly, and there was understanding in his smile. And I gave him the answer. Su Ming closed his eyes. In the snow, beside the bonfire, the flying trails were like dust that connected the sky and the earth. Even Su Ming's heart had turned into a state of dead silence. Hidden under Su Ming's covered eyes was a determined desire. "Xianzong, I will accompany you in this possession. Let's see whether the light in your eyes when you open them in the end will be your ancient death, or my determination and madness." Su Ming's eyes flew open at that instant. The snow and wind around him instantly froze. The wind did not blow, and the snow did not fall. Su Ming was no longer as handsome as he was 10 years ago. His hair started growing, and it gradually covered his shoulders before falling to his waist. It was no longer black, but dyed with the blood in Su Ming's heart. It turned into a purple that had fused with crimson. He had a head of purple hair and was dressed in white. He no longer looked young, but had a hint of ancient air about him. His body was no longer thin, but had become tall and slender. During that instant, Su Ming returned to his appearance in harmonious Morris Alba. He had returned. At the instant he opened his eyes, a third eye slowly appeared at the center of his brows. It instantly caused the world to roar and tremble, because his Tao divinity also opened in Su Ming's third eye. "My wills, are you still around?" When Su Ming mumbled, he lifted his right hand. He stared at it for an instant, and it felt as if thousands of years had passed. When the lines on Su Ming's right palm turned into a layer of purple flames, the snow in the area turned into fog. That fog surrounded the area and turned it into a haze. Su Ming saw the true morning Tao world in his memories, the Emperor of Abyss true world, the immortal sex, and Sky Hill in the flames on his palm. The four great true worlds were born in the flames on Su Ming's right hand. Perhaps they had been destroyed in the past, but at that moment, they reappeared on Su Ming's right hand. However, a strange, dark light slowly appeared in Su Ming's eyes. There was a hint of resolve in it. He could sense the wills of the four great true worlds on his palm, but they only existed in the flames. They could not come out from the flames, and neither could they fuse into his soul like when he was in harmonious Morris Alba. After all, harmonious Morris Alba was already dead. But why can I still sense your unwillingness to admit defeat? I can sense your calling to me, and I can sense the signs of your existence in this world. The light in Su Ming's eyes grew stronger. He slowly stood up, lifted his right hand and pushed the flames on the third eye at the center of his brows. During that instant, a shudder ran through Su Ming's body. Indistinct pictures instantly appeared in his third eye. They flashed by rapidly, and Su Ming saw all of them clearly. It was a butterfly that was struggling and roaring as if it could not admit defeat. It did not have a body, but Su Ming saw its soul. It was Harmonious Morris Alba's soul. That Harmonious Morris Alba's soul gave Su Ming a sense of familiarity. In fact, he saw a broken gap on the soul's wing. Harmonious Morris Alba was Su Ming's homeland. What sealed Harmonious Morris Alba's soul was space. That space seemed boundless, but in truth, there was only a pearl shining with a strange and enchanting light. Clouds and fog surrounded the pearl. It contained space and sealed Harmonious Morris Alba, and the pearl floated in a huge palace. The light spreading out from it enveloped the entire palace. This palace was built on top of the clouds, and there were countless other palaces surrounding it. It was impossible to see the end of them with a single glance. There were iron chains forming bridges between the mountains, and from afar, it looked like the mountains had formed an extremely huge formation. The rune and the mountains shrank endlessly in Su Ming's eyes until they turned into palm lines and turned into a huge palm. At that instant, Su Ming saw the owner of the palm. It was a middle-aged man dressed in a long red robe. He was meditating, and there were more than millions of cultivators kneeling down and worshiping him. They seemed to be listening to his breathing as he meditated, as if they could gain an epiphany of Tao just by listening to his breathing. It was a huge square, and beyond, it was a huge basin surrounded by mountains. There were countless cultivators in the basin. When Su Ming saw the basin shrink, he saw a huge stone monument that pierced into the clouds erected on the cliff to the east of the basin. 6 words were carved on the stone monument. 7 Moon Sect, Sky Beyond the Sky. At the instant Su Ming saw the 6 words clearly, they suddenly distorted and turned into a pair of opened eyes. They shot through the air as if they were meeting Su Ming's gaze. At the same time, the red-robed man, sitting on the field in the sect, also opened his eyes. "How dare you?" the red-robed man said flatly with a cold harumph. At the instant he spoke, an incredibly powerful presence that even Su Ming could sense instantly shot through space through his gaze and crashed against him in a domineering manner. At the same time, an overlapping shadow walked out of the red-robed man's body. It moved and looked as if it had turned into the person's clone. When it took a step forward, it stepped into the air, and as if it had found Su Ming's tracks through the divine sense he used to observe the place, it charged towards Su Ming, and in an instant, it did so. Soundless booming sounds echoed in space. Su Ming's third eye instantly closed, and his body shuddered slightly. He took a few steps back, and when a trickle of blood trickled down the corners of his mouth, he lifted his head swiftly and stared at the sky. At the instant Su Ming closed his third eye, the red-robed man's shadow appeared in the sky that was incredibly far away from him. He could no longer find Su Ming's tracks. He swept his gaze past the ground, but he did not see Su Ming's figure. He's quite vigilant. This person has extraordinary power. He has already reached the first level of Tao Divinity Realm. The red-robed man averted his gaze from the ground. After a moment of pensive silence, he turned around, stepped into space, and disappeared into the sky. Third level of Tao Divinity Realm, Tao Spirit Realm. Su Ming stared at the sky. He could sense the red-robed man who had noticed him approaching in 7 Moon Sect. He could sense the might and mighty pressure coming from him. It surpassed all the lives Su Ming had experienced besides Xianzong. This is a world that is much larger than my Harmonious Morris Alba expanse cosmos. In fact, it is even stronger. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. Since Harmonious Morris Alba had attained great completion in Avicania realm, no one in its world could surpass that realm in terms of cultivation base. Only in the final aeon and before it died would there be a life who could break the seal, such as Su Ming's Tao Divinity Realm, who had gained an epiphany. The world he was in then clearly surpassed Harmonious Morris Alba by a large margin, which was why Harmonious Morris Alba, which made Su Ming wary, had appeared in this place. But it was precisely because of it that Su Ming had found his path to continue becoming stronger. Su Ming was silent. After a long while, a glint appeared in his eyes. I must seize my way back. This is a clear difference between me and the cultivators in this place. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. When he mumbled under his breath, he turned into a long arc that charged into the distance. Right now, the most important thing is to sneak into Seven Moons Sect. I have sent Xianzong and Di Tian's pictures to my prestige. Those who are interested can take a look. Chapter 1500. When you know who you are not you. When you don't know who you are you. The murmurs echoed in Su Ming's ears and lingered in his mind. When the words turned into a thunderous roar that rumbled in his heart, Su Ming's eyes flew open. Sweat had appeared on his forehead at some unknown point of time. The sky outside was silver, and it was the result of snow falling from the sky. The land wrapped in silver was a reflection of the night sky that did not belong to the darkness. Su Ming sat in a naturally formed stone cave in a crack in a mountain. It was the 3rd month since he had charged to Seven Moons Sect. In the seemingly boundless land, Su Ming sat down to meditate and regulate his breathing. This place was incredibly far away from Seven Moons Sect. Even if Su Ming was in the 1st level of Tao Divinity Realm, he would still need several years to travel such a long distance. That was why he did not charge forward without stopping. Instead, he would occasionally rest to ensure that his level of cultivation was at its peak. At that moment, he opened his eyes. He stared at the night sky outside in silence and remembered the dream he had previously. He rarely dreamed, and it was especially rare when he meditated. Yet just then it had happened. There was only one sentence Su Ming was familiar with in the dream. It echoed in his ears, and even when Su Ming opened his eyes, it did not disappear even after a long time had passed. In silence, Su Ming stood up and walked out of the stone cave. He left behind a trail of footprints in the snow and walked into the distance. He walked past mountains and rivers until the sun rose. When it was dusk, Su Ming saw a city in front of him. It was dusk, and the city was filled with sparks of light. There were also sounds of people bustling about, and the place was bustling with activity. As Su Ming stared at the city, he closed his eyes. After a moment, when he reopened them, he walked towards the city. While walking in the dusk, he saw the red lanterns hanging high in the houses. Many children laughed and played with the silver bells. Almost everyone in the city had a smile on their faces, and it made Su Ming remember how his master would bring him to an unfamiliar city on this day every single year over the past 10 years. There he would experience the atmosphere of a new year. It was a new year, the last day of the year. When dusk passed, night fell, and the sun rose again, a new year would begin. Every year, on this day, ancient Zong would celebrate. All the cities in the country would be filled with this atmosphere. The lanterns hanging high in the houses shone with light in the snow, as if they could chase away the cold from their homes so that the night would not be cold. Su Ming walked through the city and looked around him. He gradually lowered his head until he reached an alley in the corner of the city. There was a noodle stall there, and a large amount of white steam rose from the boiling water in the freezing wind, covering up the old man who was cooking noodles and making them look rather indistinct. The noodle stall wasn't big, and there were only 4 or 5 tables. There was a tent-like curtain that covered the snow, but it couldn't block much of the wind. There were 2 or 3 men sitting inside, eating scalding noodles and drinking broth that seemed to be able to dispel the cold. "Elder Wu, it's a new year. Why don't you bring out a few pots of old wine from your collection and let us have a taste?" One of the men eating the noodles said loudly with a smile. When he spoke, white steam puffed out of his mouth, and it was incredibly obvious in the snow. "You lot. Oh well." The old man who was cooking noodles seemed to have smiled. He turned around and brought out a pot of wine before placing it on the table. The man immediately picked up the pot of wine and quickly drank a mouthful before he said with a smile, That's more like it. At least we didn't waste our time coming here to celebrate the new year with you." At that moment, Su Ming walked into the noodle stall and sat down beside a table in the corner to look at the snow and wind outside. "Shopkeeper, a bowl of noodles." The old man who was cooking the noodles turned his head around and cast Su Ming a glance. He brought out a bowl and scooped up a large amount of noodles. He even added some meat before placing it in front of Su Ming. Su Ming looked at the noodles on the table and started eating them quietly. The noodles tasted pretty good. The broth was very hot, and once it entered his mouth, it felt warm. It was as if he was no longer that cold in the snow and wind. Time trickled by. When night fell, there were not many people left on the streets. This was a festival, and it was also a day for families to reunite. At this time, families would usually gather together and watch children play and watch candlelight shine. On this night, they would experience the warmth of their families in the warmth of their homes. Compared to the snow and wind outside, practically everyone could enjoy this warmth, but Su Ming did not. When the men in the noodle stall left, the moaning wind caused the tent to let out flapping sounds, and Su Ming sighed softly. "Why aren't you going home?" The old man who was cooking the noodles sat by the side and picked up an old pot of wine that had been warmed for a while. Once he took a sip, he looked at Su Ming. "I can't find the way," Su Ming said slowly after a moment of silence. "It's not that you can't find the way, you just don't have a home, right?" The old man smiled and picked up another pot of wine. He came before Su Ming, sat down, and placed it before him. With the light from the fire, Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the old man. This was a mortal, an old man whose face was covered in wrinkles. He had already reached the end of his life. "What about you?" Su Ming picked up the pot of wine. Once he took a sip, he looked at the snow and wind outside and asked languidly, "What about you?" "I have a home, but I'm the only one there. There's no difference whether I go back or not. It's better if I stay here." The old man smiled. More wrinkles seemed to appear on his face as he smiled, making it seem as if there was anguish in his smile. Su Ming did not speak. He drank his wine. In the cold wind, and as snow fell from the sky, the moon appeared in the night sky. Compared to the lights from the houses in the area, the noodle stall also had a light. However, under that light, there was no warmth, only a desolate desolation. It was a change in his thoughts. It was as if he was longing for this moment. He originally thought that the beautiful things in the past had been buried in his heart, and that he no longer had a heart. But right then, in the shadow under the light, there was a pain that could not be blown away by the wind and buried by the snow. In the midst of the pain and cold, Su Ming remembered his elder, his senior brothers in the Ninth Summit, Yu Xian, Song Lan, Su Hui, and the bald crane, along with the faces in his memories. As he thought about them, he finished the pot of wine. He drank wine, but since he no longer had any tears, he could only treat the wine as tears. Once he swallowed it, it turned into a bitterness and astringency that he could never get rid of in his heart. He would make the bitterness and astringency remain, because only by doing so would Su Ming know that he was still alive. Only then did he know that he had not died. Only then would he have more determination to change everything. Even if it was practically impossible, Su Ming would still make it possible. The old man looked at Su Ming. When he asked in a hoarse voice, he brought out another pot of wine and placed it in front of Su Ming. "They're very, very far away. What about you?" Su Ming shook his head. "My family? There used to be a lot of them. I had a grandson, and he had a group of friends. They could all be considered as my family. He even found a few wives. Our family was originally very lively." The old man drank, and nostalgia appeared in his eyes. "But one day, when I woke up, he was gone. We couldn't find him. The originally lively house was no longer lively. When everyone went out to search for him, they all left. They went to many places, but I don't know whether they found him or not. I'm the only one left. The house is also empty. I don't know where he went, and I didn't go out to search for him. I wanted to stay here and light a lamp in the house and wait for him. If he came back one day, I didn't want him to not be able to find his way home. I didn't want him to not be able to see the lamp in the house to guide him," the old man mumbled. His voice was hoarse, and there seemed to be an ancient air about him in the wind and snow. "Honestly, I'm not really alone. Compared to me, our emperor is the one who's lonely." The old man sighed softly, then picked up the pot of wine and took a sip. "We all know that the emperor has 3 princes. Every time the 3 princes come of age, they will be taken away to wander the world. And once they do, they will be gone for 6,000 years. During those 6,000 years, he is alone. He also wants to forever light a lamp in the royal city to guide his princes home, because legend has it that there's the possibility that each of our princes will lose themselves when they wander the world and will not know the way home." As the old man spoke, he lowered his head, as if he was drunk. Su Ming was silent. He drank the last mouthful of wine from the pot of wine, then stood up and walked to the old man's side. When he swung his right hand, the wind and snow around him moved away, causing warmth to appear in the place. Then he walked out of the noodle stall and into the snow and wind in the direction of Seven Moon's sect. He walked out of the city and into the night wind. When Su Ming left into the distance and his figure disappeared into the night sky beyond the city, the seemingly drunk old man slowly lifted his head and stood up. He stared at the night sky, and his face slowly changed, as if time was changing his body until he became middle-aged. He sighed softly. When you learn who you are no longer you. When you no longer know who you are you. As he let out a soft sigh, the entire city instantly turned into an illusion. He was the only one left standing in the wind and snow. As he let out a soft sigh, he turned around and silently walked in the direction of the capital of ancient Zong. What is true and what is false? It's already been 3,000 years. When will you understand what is true that you seek? What is true? What is false that you think is false? The middle-aged man murmured. His heart ached as he slowly disappeared into the wind and snow, his figure fading away. Only the wind and snow remained. There seemed to be a sigh in it, and it lingered in the world for a long time. Chapter 1501. The wind blew, and the snow fell in the distance. In his dreams, he did not know how old he was. In the hazy world of mortals, who would ascend the heights? The night was vast, and smoke rose in spirals. What was not true and what was false was a bridge. How many cycles of reincarnation were there? Su Ming left. He did not care about whether the city behind him had disappeared. The old man's words still lingered in his mind, but they could not taint his heart. His Tao and his determination would continue down his path. Seven Moon's sect was Su Ming's first goal. He wanted to enter the sect and seize back the will that belonged to him. Even though the red-robed man in the part of the sect that Su Ming had noticed was much stronger than him and was a true powerful warrior in Tao spirit realm, he could not stop Su Ming's footsteps. He went through seasons and years. On a rainy day that never stopped, Su Ming stared at the vast sky in the distance. He saw mountains surrounding it and a huge stone monument that pierced the clouds. Seven Moon Sect, sky beyond the sky. Su Ming stared at the stone monument quietly, then sat down on the crown of a tree in a forest located some distance away from the mountain. Rain poured down, and lightning howled in the night sky. Su Ming closed his eyes. He was not in a hurry. He wanted to wait for a chance to step into the sect. That chance finally appeared after Su Ming waited for a month. It was still raining. At noon, 8 long arcs charged past Seven Moon's sect's mountain gate. They belonged to 8 Seven Moon's sect disciples. The person in the lead was an old man, and behind him were 7 men and women. In a flash, they charged into the distance from the forest where Su Ming was. Su Ming opened his eyes. When he looked over, his gaze landed on the old man. His level of cultivation was equivalent to that of the sublime paragons of harmonious Morris Alba expanse cosmos, and he was rather outstanding. There was a girl behind him. She was beautiful, but there was a hint of coldness and arrogance in her eyes. Occasionally, she would turn her head around to look at the boy behind her in disdain. The boy's face was pale, and his eyes were tightly shut. They might seem to be 8 people, but in truth, the boy was like a puppet. He was controlled by a string of bells in the girl's hand. The others weren't very old either, but they all had nervous expressions. Occasionally, they would look at the old man at the very front as they silently advanced. Su Ming did not pay too much attention to the boys and girls. Once he swept his gaze past the old man, he stood up from the tree crown. Just as he was about to follow the old man, a glint suddenly appeared in his eyes, and he looked in the direction of Seven Moon's sect. There were dozens of long arcs charging in the direction where the old man had gone. Further into the distance were nearly 1,000 long arcs. In fact, there were nearly 10,000 long arcs charging over at the same time from further away. A thought appeared in Su Ming's mind. When he looked over, he saw that these long arcs had formed a single entity. Within each of them was a senior leading several youths. There were 7 to 8 people at the least, and there were dozens of them at the most. One by one, they sped off into the distance. Most of them looked nervous, but a few of them looked calm. As for these teenagers, most of them were in Heaven Cultivation Realm and had yet to reach World Plane Realm. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence before he took a step forward and followed behind the crowd. When dusk arrived, the 10,000 figures stopped at the edge of a canyon. The annual competition of 7 moons has arrived again. Most of you have been in the sect for more than 10 years. In the past, you only saw other people go through the disaster of 7 moons. Today, it's your turn. All disciples enter the canyon. There are 3,000 spirit plates inside, and there are 9,000 of you. Only those who obtain the spirit plates will have the right to become inner cultivator disciples in the sect. Those who do not obtain the spirit plates will become food for the beasts in the canyon after 18 hours. I believe that all of you know this very well. The rules will not change. Those who obtain more than 100 spirit plates will be able to enter the sect and be chosen by the sect elders to become disciples of different sect elders. Only by doing so will you have the chance to obtain the recommendation from your sect elders to enter the inner sect for 1 year of training. Besides the teenagers, there were hundreds of middle-aged or old men with extraordinary levels of cultivation among the 10,000 cultivators. Among them was a middle-aged scholar in white robes. At that moment, he spoke flatly, and his voice reverberated in all directions. My fellow Taoists of the same sect, we might be at the bottom of the sect and have to guide the disciples who have joined the sect within 100 years to train, but if the disciples under us have outstanding performances, we will also be rewarded by the sect. In fact, we might even have the chance to advance. This happens every year. I wonder who among us will be lucky this time. But no matter what, my fellow Taoists who have advanced, do not forget that if you have the chance, please help us. Once the middle-aged scholar finished speaking, he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed deeply towards the hundreds of cultivators around him. Anticipation appeared on the faces of the cultivators. All of them wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed politely. All of you get ready. The sect elders will come later. At that time, the entrance to the inner sect for 7 moons will begin. The middle-aged scholar stood up and swept his gaze past the nearly 10,000 anxious teenagers. There was an awe-inspiring look on his face, and to these teenagers, there was an incredibly great pressure on them at that moment. Su Ming watched this scene from the distance with a pensive look on his face. He got rid of the thought of possessing the cultivators in the area, and with a glint in his eyes, he looked towards the sky. Before long, when the sun at noon was at its brightest, the rain seemed to have fused with the sunlight. At the instant it turned into 7 colors. A loud bang suddenly rang out in the sky. It was as if the sky had been torn apart, and a person slowly walked out from within. He was dressed in a long blue robe, and he was a white-haired old man. His gaze was awe-inspiring, and when he walked out slowly, the rain in the sky seemed to have stopped. At the instant he appeared, the hundreds of cultivators, including the middle-aged scholar, wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed respectfully towards the sky. We greet sect elder one. The old man in the blue robe nodded slowly. When he swept his gaze past the near 10,000 teenagers on the ground, a fierce glare shone in his eyes. Today is the test for you to enter the inner sect. Those who succeed will enter the inner sect. All those who enter the inner sect will be the most precious disciples of 7 Moons sect. You will also be the future of 7 Moons sect. Over the years, the test to enter the inner sect has been held. There are plenty of people who have reached Avacania realm within 1,000 years. In fact, if you can obtain 100 plates, you can even enter the inner sect and be personally chosen by the sect elders as disciples. If you have enough talent, you can obtain a spot to train in the inner sect sky beyond the sky. In the history of Seven Moons Sect, there have been 12 people who have reached Avacania realm within 100 years. Now, the selection to enter the inner sect of Seven Moons Sect will begin. When the old man in blue spoke, he swung his arm. Immediately, booming sounds shook the sky and earth. The fog in the canyon tumbled about, and in an instant, it turned into a huge vortex. The faces of a near 10,000 teenagers standing at the edge of the canyon turned pale. They could not help but be dragged into the vortex by the suction force. Su Ming's expression remained the same. He stared at the incredibly awe-inspiring old man in blue in the sky. That person's level of cultivation had already reached Avacania realm, but he was only in the initial stage. If Su Ming wanted to kill him, even if he no longer had his will, with the power of his Tao divinity, he would only need to snap his fingers to kill him. Seven Moons Sect has unfathomable depths. There are as many powerful warriors as there are clouds in the sky, and I don't even know how many of them are in Tao divinity realm. If I possess this old man, even if I have the chance to retrieve my will, it will be difficult for me to escape, and the pearl is in the red-robed man's hands, so it will be difficult for me to snatch it. If that's the case, since I chose to possess someone to enter Seven Moons Sect, then instead of possessing the old man, it would be better for me to possess one of the teenage disciples. There are only 12 people in Avacania realm within 100 years, huh? If I reach the first level of Tao divinity realm within 100 years as a disciple, I wonder just how great of a ruckus I will cause in Seven Moons Sect. By doing so, I will have more chances to get close to the red-robed man. Su Ming sank into a moment of pensive silence before a glint appeared in his eyes. A resolute look appeared on his face, and with one move, he charged towards the vortex in the abyss. With his level of cultivation, if he did not want others to see any traces of him, then no one, not even the blue-robed old man, would be able to notice him. Su Ming moved, and his figure disappeared into the fog in the abyss. Once he fused with the abyss, Su Ming charged downwards. On the way, he saw a corpse lying in a crack on the walls by his side. That corpse belonged to a teenager, and Su Ming had seen it before. It was the teenager controlled by the woman like a puppet. At that moment, the teenager's body was thin and shriveled up. He had turned into a corpse, as if all his life force had been forcefully taken away by someone with a secret art to stimulate his power for a short period of time. Su Ming swept his gaze over the area, but did not pay any attention to it. He charged downwards, and in just the span of a few breaths, an invisible barrier that others would find difficult to notice appeared in front of him. The barrier did not have any use in blocking people. Instead, it seemed to have divided the world in the abyss into two. At the instant he approached the barrier, Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt. He levitated above the barrier, and a glint appeared in his eyes. When he lifted his right hand and pressed it against the barrier, he closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened his eyes, and a frown appeared on his face. These young disciples are indeed highly valued by Seven Tao Sect. There are actually a dozen-something divine senses in the trial world behind the barrier that are constantly observing everything. Among these divine senses, there are 3 who are very strong. If I barge in recklessly and don't possess them, then I might be discovered. Su Ming fell into pensive silence for a moment. Then a thought suddenly appeared in his head. He lifted his head and looked at the top of the cliff, at the crack where the boy's corpse lay. You and I are fated to meet. Then I will borrow your dead body and make you the strongest prodigy in the history of Seven Moons Sect. Su Ming said faintly, and with a single move, he charged upwards. At that moment, the red-robed man was sitting in the huge, square Su Ming had seen with his divine sense in the past in Seven Moons Sect. Around him were a dozen-something men and women with calm expressions. Most of them were sitting indifferently, but their gazes were all on the huge crystal floating at the center of the square. There were countless pictures in the crystal, and each of them was a teenager. There were nearly 10,000 pictures, and all of them showed everything that was happening in the abyss. This woman is pretty good. She managed to find a spirit plate so quickly. This lad is also pretty good. He's ruthless, and he's decisive when he attacks. If he has good potential, he'll be a good seedling. The dozen-something people in the field talk to each other with indifferent expressions on their faces. The next chapter will be a small climax. I've also uploaded pictures of Yu Xian and Ling Tianho, the renegade immortal sword paragon. Everyone, you can take a look at them in the prestige section. Finally, we'll rest for another day tomorrow. The day after tomorrow, we'll continue erupting with power and rush to the top. Chapter 1502. While the sect elders of Seven Moons sect stared at the near 10,000 pictures and almost every disciple in the huge crystal, the already dead teenager in the crack on the wall of the canyon suddenly shuddered. Su Ming's body slowly overlapped with the teenager's. In just the span of a few breaths, when Su Ming's body disappeared, the teenager suddenly opened his eyes. An aloof and calm light shone in his pupils. It was a gaze that had never appeared on the teenager before. It belonged to only one person, Su Ming. When Su Ming opened his eyes, the body he possessed started letting out cracking sounds and gradually recovered from its withered state. In the end, it turned into the boy's original appearance, and he slowly sat up. He cracked his neck and moved his body. Su Ming's expression became as indifferent as ever, but there was a freezing glare that shone in that indifference. His name is Wang Tao, huh? He's an inconspicuous person among the outer sect disciples of Seven Moons sect. He's often bullied, and his senior sister sucked away all his life force to temporarily increase her level of cultivation so that she could stand out during the Seven Moons disaster. Since you died with resentment, and since I used your body, we could be considered to be fated. I will help you. First settle your grudge. Then I will make your face shine brilliantly in Seven Moons sect. A sinister and ghastly smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. After the drastic change in harmonious Morris Alba, Su Ming's personality had changed by a large degree. He did not care about other people's lives and deaths. He did not care about the changes in the world. He only cared about his own determination, and for it, even if he had to overturn the world, he would still walk down a path that he would never turn back. Anyone who stood in their way on this path would die. If anyone saw the smile on Su Ming's lips, their hearts would definitely let out a thump. It would give them the feeling that they were in a sea of blood and that they were being stared at by a poisonous snake. An endless chill and the shadow of death spread out from the bottom of their hearts. Su Ming pushed his right hand against the stone wall and turned into a long arc that charged towards the barrier beneath him. He did not stop for even a single moment. In an instant, he closed in on the barrier, and without a single sound, he shot through it and appeared in the trial grounds for the outer sect disciples of Seven Moons sect. This was another part of the sky. The sky was the color of blood, and the ground was filled with ruins and dust. There were many cities with traces of history, giving off a desolate feeling. Su Ming swiftly descended from the sky. At the instant he landed, he slowly stood up and lifted his head. He did not look around him, but walked forward with a cold and stern look on his face. At the moment he possessed the boy, his level of cultivation had been automatically suppressed by 99%. With his inborn talent in the art of possession, unless he ran into someone whose level of cultivation was much higher than his, then even those in Tao's spirit realm would find it difficult to see the level of cultivation Su Ming had suppressed. They would only be able to see the presence of someone in heaven cultivation realm. If I want to enter the inner sect of Seven Moons sect and become the sex prodigy, then I absolutely cannot keep a low profile, since there are a dozen-something divine senses constantly observing this place. Then perhaps someone has already noticed me. If that's the case, I might as well act arrogantly. A ghastly smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. He moved forward. At the same time he descended in the trial grounds, A picture appeared among the near 10,000 pictures in the huge crystal that was being observed by the dozen-something sect elders in Seven Moons Sect Square. That picture clearly showed Su Ming's figure, and it followed him as he moved forward. For some reason, this boy entered the trial grounds later than the others. A woman in an orange long robe said faintly. A woman dressed in a long orange robe spoke flatly from among the dozen-something people. She swept her gaze past the picture in the crystal that showed Su Ming. It doesn't matter. This trial is a matter of life and death for them, so they naturally need to make some preparations for such an important matter. Although entering late will cause them to lose the initiative, it might not be a bad idea to make sufficient preparations. An old man with gray hair beside the woman spoke with a smile. He had also seen Su Ming suddenly appearing in the picture. The young man you're talking about is quite interesting. As the two of them spoke, a blue-robed scholar not far away smiled and pointed at the crystal. A ray of sword light flashed behind Su Ming in the near 10,000 pictures in the crystal. It was a boy with a sinister expression. He was charging toward Su Ming, and he was so quick that the main focus was on his sword. He closed in on Su Ming in an instant, but Su Ming only took a step to the side. When he turned around, he lifted his left hand and seized the boy's neck with the momentum behind him. At the instant terror appeared on the boy's face, Su Ming tightened his left hand. Blood immediately trickled out of the boy's mouth, and he breathed his last. This scene attracted the attention of the two people who had been talking to each other, but they soon averted their gazes. This sort of scene could be found everywhere in the near 10,000 pictures. Even the blue-robed scholar only smiled before he shifted his gaze to look at the other disciples. They wanted to find someone who suited their tastes among the people so that they could consider taking him in as a disciple. As for whether there would be someone who obtained 100 spirit plates, that rarely happened over the years, which was why even though they looked forward to it, they did not pay too much attention to it, unless someone had already shown themselves. In the ruins of the world in the canyon, Su Ming let go of his left hand. The boy in front of him widened his eyes and fell to the ground. Su Ming swept his gaze past the boy, then turned around and continued walking into the distance. Su Ming did not move quickly when he walked through the vast land. Soon, the ruins of a city appeared in front of him. No one could tell how many years it had been since it was abandoned. At that moment, there were broken walls everywhere. Su Ming swept his gaze past it, and a cold sneer appeared at the corners of his lips. He stepped into the ruins. Almost at the instant Su Ming stepped in, shrill cries came from the area around him. 7 boys and girls appeared at the same time and formed a rune that instantly enveloped Su Ming. It was a sword rune. When it shone, a huge net appeared above Su Ming. It shone with a red light, and when it fell, it looked as if it could cut through all flesh and blood. As the 7 people laughed ferociously, sword light shone, and Su Ming moved. He instantly appeared in front of a boy. He lifted his right hand and struck the boy's body. With a bang, the boy's eyes went wide. When he coughed up blood, Su Ming grabbed his body and smashed him against the ground. With it, the boy's body crumbled. With his flesh and blood splattered everywhere, Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized the air. Immediately, all the blood tumbled backwards and charged towards his right hand. When Su Ming unfurled his right hand, a blood-red moon appeared in the air. This was a low-grade divine ability of Seven Moons Sect. It was one of the 3 arts Su Ming had mastered when he possessed the boy. It was known as Blood of 7 Moons. Blood of 7 Moons. When Su Ming said those words flatly, the blood moon exploded with a bang. An endless amount of blood droplets swept through the area and turned into blood moons that were shaped like sharp blades. In an instant, they pierced through the bodies of the 6 people around them, causing them to shudder. Then, their bodies were immediately torn to shreds and cut into pieces. Su Ming swung his right hand, and 3 spirit plates immediately flew out from the flesh and blood around him. They landed on his palm, but he did not put them into his storage bag. Instead, he held them in his hand. When he walked, The three spirit plates knocked against each other and let out tinkling sounds that spread through the area. He swung his arm, and the blood in the area tumbled backwards. They gathered together to form a blood moon that was about the height of a person. It enveloped Su Ming within it, causing him to look like he was filled with a murderous air. Just as he was about to leave, Su Ming's footsteps came to a sudden halt. He frowned and turned around slowly to look at the ruins and dust around him. As he did so, his gaze landed on a broken stone monument. There were a few indistinct words on it. At the instant Su Ming saw the stone monument and the words, his body shuddered in a manner that no one else could notice. Due to the indistinct words being incomplete, only two words could be seen clearly, and they were the words Divine Essence Star Ocean. Divine Essence Star Ocean. Su Ming's pupils shrank, and a hint of bewilderment appeared in his eyes. The stone monument had appeared before in his memories. It was a world monument erected beyond Black Ink Planet, and when he stepped into Divine Essence Star Ocean, it was a world monument. When Su Ming stepped into Divine Essence Star Ocean in the past, he had swept his divine sense through it. When Su Ming stared at the broken stone monument, the blue-robed scholar among the dozen-something sect elders in Seven Moons Sect's field noticed the picture of Su Ming's divine essence, Star Ocean, once again. This boy has extraordinary power, and he's ruthless. He broke the trap set up by the seven people. This boy is extraordinary. The art of blood of Seven Moons also has a different flavor in his hands. Not bad. A hint of praise appeared in the blue-robed scholar's eyes. He stared at Su Ming, who was enveloped by the blood moon in the picture. When he spoke, other people noticed Su Ming one after another. At that moment, pictures would occasionally disappear from the crystal. Each time one of them disappeared, it meant that a disciple had died. There were originally nearly 10,000 pictures, but by then there were only 6,000-something of them left. At the same time, 6,000-something names appeared on the other side of the crystal. There was a number behind each name, and that number represented how many spirit plates they had obtained. At that moment, the person in the first place was a person called Yi Long. He had obtained 30-something spirit plates. The person in the second place was a woman's name. Her name was Chun Feng. She also had 23 spirit plates. As for Wang Tao, who was represented by Su Ming, he was ranked in the hundreds. Among the 6,000-something names, he was inconspicuous. This child is not bad, but that's just his performance so far. When he can enter the top 10, then he will enter our eyes. Among the dozen-something sect elders was an old man dressed in a long white robe. He swept his gaze past the picture of Su Ming's figure and said faintly, "On that day, the third night watch will start a day earlier, but the last night watch will be at midnight. This is the first night watch. My monthly votes have been sold out." Chapter 1503. What I'm even more curious about is that this person didn't put away his spirit plates in a storage bag, but held them in his hands. Among the dozen people, a young man sitting beside the red-robed man revealed a cold smile as he spoke. However, his smile seemed to be filled with a chilling aura. Haha, since all of you don't think highly of him, then I'll just have to choose. The blue-robed scholar smiled and lifted his right hand to point at the crystal. Immediately, Su Ming's picture floated out and floated in front of the scholar. At the instant the scholar singled out Su Ming's picture, the ground around him suddenly roared and trembled. From the distance, a dozen-something figures appeared and charged toward Su Ming. The appearance of these figures was incredibly sudden. Once they appeared, a powerful killing intent immediately filled the area, but Su Ming's expression did not change. When the dozen-something figures closed in on him, he lifted his right hand, lowered his head, and pushed his palm against the ground. With it, booming sounds immediately reverberated in the air. A windstorm swiftly spread out and swept through the area, covering up the picture. After the span of a few breaths, when the dust from the windstorm disappeared, a bloodless corpse was left on the ground. In the distance, a blood moon that was twice as large as before enveloped Su Ming's departing figure. In the blood moon, there were no longer 3 spirit plates in Su Ming's hands, but 6. They were knocking against each other and letting out clear, tinkling sounds. Since the blue-robed scholar had singled out Su Ming's picture, this scene immediately caught the attention of the dozen-something sect elders in the area. Their eyes immediately lit up. Only the red-robed man and the woman who was the most beautiful among the people in the area continued meditating with their eyes closed. They did not even spare a glance at Su Ming. The woman's face was so beautiful that it was as if she should not exist in the world. It was enough to make all lives' hearts pound when they saw her. She was dressed in a purple dress, and when she sat cross-legged, she looked as noble as a peony. There were also a few crystal chips at the center of her brows that looked as if they were reflecting the faces of all lives. What's his name? This person is Wang Tao. Only his name has 6 spirit plates. This is no longer the power of those in heaven cultivation realm. This is the power of those in world plane realm. That's right. It doesn't matter whether it's the blood of 7 moons or the earth-shattering fiend. The might of these 2 divine abilities can allow him to defeat all cultivators in heaven cultivation realm. As the dozen-something sect elders spoke to each other, the picture where Su Ming was immediately changed once again. Before him was a mountain, and there was a tall and slender figure standing on it. That person no longer looked like a teenager, but a young man. His gaze was fixed on Su Ming. That's Cho Wu. He has already obtained 7 spirit tablets. He's one of the most outstanding people in this trial. I wonder what will happen between him and Wang Tao. When the dozen-something sect elders looked over, Su Ming stood in midair and stared at the young man at the top of the mountain before him with a cold gaze. You should recognize me. Hand over your spirit tablet and fuck off. I'll spare your life. I'll give you 3 breaths of time. There was arrogance in the young man's voice. When he spoke, Su Ming's expression remained the same. His cold gaze did not shift. 3 breaths passed in the blink of an eye, and the young man let out a cold chuckle. He moved swiftly and turned into a long arc that instantly charged towards the blood moon that enveloped Su Ming. You're looking for, before the young man could finish speaking, Su Ming had already taken a step forward. He lifted his right hand that held the string of plates and seized the young man's neck, instantly silencing the words he had yet to finish speaking. At the same time, Su Ming's level of cultivation seemed to have reached a breakthrough. He shattered from heaven cultivation realm, and the presence of world plane realm appeared. The moment that presence appeared, the young man in Su Ming's right hand immediately shuddered. His eyes bulged out, and terror and shock appeared in them. Blood started flowing out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and all his pores were filled with a large amount of blood. The blood in his body flowed out in reverse, and drops of blood turned into blood threads that charged towards the blood moon around Su Ming. In just the span of a few breaths, all the blood in the young man's body had dried up, and all of it was absorbed by Su Ming's blood moon. Su Ming let go of his right hand, and the young man's withered body fell swiftly. Su Ming seized the air with his right hand, and the young man's storage bag immediately flew out. He patted it and brought out the 7 spirit plates inside. When he held them in his hand, there were now 13 spirit plates in total. This scene was witnessed by the 10 or so elders in the plaza, causing their expressions to change. He reached a breakthrough in his level of cultivation. The art of blood of 7 moons has actually reached such a level in his hands. What sort of potential does this person have? He actually reached a breakthrough just like that. 13 spirit plates, and he's already ranked 12th. He increased it again. He now has 14 spirit plates. 16. Almost all the sect elders in the field cast their gazes on Su Ming. They immediately saw that once he reached a breakthrough in his level of cultivation, his speed had increased swiftly. From the distance, he looked like a blood moon hanging in the sky, shining with a strange and enchanting light. As he charged through the trial grounds, he ran into some people and sucked away all their blood. Once the blood moon became even bigger, he obtained a few more spirit plates. Su Ming had long since known that he had caught the attention of the sect elders in the field, and he knew that he had to be seen by them. Only then could he proceed with the next step of his plan. As for the problem of exposing himself, Su Ming was confident that his inborn ability to possess others would not be able to see through him so easily. The only thing that had left him slightly dazed was the stone monument he had seen in the wasteland. It had turned into a heavy weight, and at that moment, Su Ming buried it at the bottom of his heart. He walked forward at a moderate pace in the sky. He spread out his divine sense, which was equivalent to that of a cultivator in world-plane realm. With the dozen-something spirit plates in his hands as bait, he ran into quite a number of people who came to snatch them because of their level of cultivation. The power of this blood of 7 moons art is pretty extraordinary. As Su Ming moved forward, he looked at the blood moon around him, which was now nearly 60 feet big. He sensed that the power contained within it was becoming increasingly stronger, and he flew even faster. It was as if he had truly turned into a blood moon that hung high in the sky. It was incredibly eye-catching, and the dozen-something spirit plates in Su Ming's hands were enough to attract quite a number of people's attention. 6 hours later, the number of spirit plates in Su Ming's hands had reached 31. Some of them were stained with blood, and the tinkling sounds they let out when they touched each other seemed to carry a murderous air, causing some people to feel as if cold water had been poured over their bodies when they saw Su Ming's figure. With a shudder, they immediately turned around and fled. Su Ming did not chase after those who fled. In truth, he had not taken the initiative to attack any of the 30-something spirit plates he had obtained. Instead, when other people's greed and killing intent closed in on them, Su Ming crushed them with a flip of his hand and took the spirit plates in passing. But gradually, the number of people he encountered became fewer and fewer. Clearly, as time passed, the disciples who entered the trial by fire had either died or had immediately chosen to hide after obtaining a spirit tablet. They would not come out until the very last moment. At that moment, the people who were still moving about in the sky were either people who believed that their level of cultivation was high and wanted to obtain more spirit plates so that they could aspire to become cauldrons. After all, there were not 100 spirit plates that would appear in every trial. There were also cultivators who had come to an agreement with each other and would appear in groups. They would use numbers to obtain victory, and they would never gather spirit plates for just a few people. There were at least 3 to 5 cultivators like this, and at most, there would be dozens to nearly 100 of them. Once they ran into each other, most of them would avoid each other, and until the very end, neither side would be heavily injured. It could be said that there was practically no one who would walk alone like Su Ming. The sounds coming from the 30-something spirit plates in Su Ming's hands as they crashed into each other and the sheer number of spirit plates made it so that even if Su Ming had the astonishing blood moon around him, once he ran into the crowd of disciples, they would still find it difficult to control themselves and try to snatch his spirit plates. For example, at that moment, dozens of disciples appeared before Su Ming. All of them were staring at him, and when their gazes fell on the spirit plates in his right hand, greed appeared on their faces. Su Ming cast a glance at the dozens of people. He moved, but he did not attack. Instead, he turned into a long arc and left into the distance. From the distance, the blood moon had turned into a bloody scar. Su Ming was in front, and the dozens of disciples were behind him. After about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, another group of dozens of people saw Su Ming, and without any hesitation, they joined the fight for the spirit plates. When another hour passed, under Su Ming's deliberate control, there were nearly 300 disciples behind him. In fact, he could even see long arcs closing in on him from further away. They formed a vague encirclement around him. It's about time. Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt. When he turned around, a ferocious smile appeared at the corners of his lips. These people might have low levels of cultivation, but Su Ming did not have the heart to kill the weak. Since they chose to provoke him, then their fates were sealed. As Su Ming turned around, he lifted his right hand and seized the blood moon around him, then yanked it downwards. Immediately, the blood moon shattered with a bang and turned into an endless amount of blood droplets that spread through the area with loud bangs. At the same time, under the gazes of the dozen-something sect elders in the field, Su Ming's level of cultivation rose once again when he was forced into a corner and forced to the point where he could not escape. From the initial stage of World Plane Realm, he reached the middle stage of World Plane Realm, and he launched a slaughter that caused even their expressions to change. This slaughter lasted for the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn before the area around Su Ming fell silent. He swung his arms, and a gigantic blood moon that was 300-something feet tall appeared around him. It enveloped him, causing the sect disciples who had originally intended to close in on him to turn around and flee without any hesitation. This is the second watch, and there is still the third watch. Also, from midnight onwards, it will be the terrifying Double 11. This is a terrifying day, the most terrifying day in history. To all men, this is a nightmare. This morning, my wife glared at me fiercely and told me to leave behind my online banking USB. She wants me to stay up all night, and tomorrow morning, she wants me to send my child to school. This reminds me of the cursed Double 11 last year. I hate Double 11. I hate it so much. Deep into the night, I've been waking up with a start lately, and when I open my eyes, I'll see my wife laughing evilly as she stares at the items on the computer screen. Every single time this happens, I'll clutch my blanket and curse Double 11. But I have a way out of this. I have to thank my brothers in the group. Tonight, once I update the third picture, I'll open my online banking account and enter the wrong password 3 times in a row. I think that everyone has a responsibility to fight against Double 11. As long as we do it, the evil Double 11 will turn into ashes. Finally, I'll upload the great and filthy Su Ligua's picture in my account. I intend to use him to guard the mansion and fight against the evil Double 11. Fellow Taoists, are there any of you who will use Su Ligua to guard the mansion with me? Let us use the dignified and holy Su Ligua to fight against the evil 24 hours. Chapter 1504. He actually reached a breakthrough again. This has never happened in all the trials since ancient times. There's something wrong. There's something strange about it. Unless this child's potential is something that will only appear once in hundreds of thousands of years, there's definitely something strange about him. If there's nothing strange about him, then I will be his master. The dozen-something sect elders in the field immediately stopped looking at the other pictures and cast their gazes on Su Ming's picture. Su Ming's 2 breakthroughs might seem weak to them, but the meaning behind it was definitely different, which was why they paid quite a bit of attention to it. After all, the 13 old monsters in 7 Moons sect who had reached Avicania realm 100 years ago had already reached Tao's spirit realm. 6 of them trained all year round in the intersect world, and the 7th was right beside them at that moment. It was the red-robed man. The 7 of them had once shown astonishing potential in the trial, but even so, they had not been as unbelievable as Su Ming's. In the midst of their shock, Su Ming turned into a huge blood moon that was 300-something feet tall, and he practically became the trial world's nightmare. Wherever he went, few disciples would dare to provoke him. Usually, when they saw him, they would immediately turn around and leave in shock. The battle between hundreds of people had already caused Su Ming's reputation to spread to all the other outer sect disciples in the sect within a short period of time. Because of it, the blood moon became a symbol that no one could provoke. At that moment, the number of spirit plates in Su Ming's hand had already reached 140-something. The sounds of the spirit plates crashing into each other came from the blood moon and echoed in the area. The clear sounds did not bring about greed to those who heard them, but fear. The blood moon also became a nightmare in the trial world. When another 4 hours passed, Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt, and he looked into the distance. He saw several long arcs charging forth in the distance. There were 5 people in total, and they were originally charging towards him, but in an instant they changed their direction. The person in the lead was a girl. She was the one who had sucked away the life force of the boy Su Ming possessed, and the 4 people beside her were all acquaintances of the boy Su Ming possessed. When the 5 people saw the blood moon from the distance, their expressions changed, but the instant they turned around and were about to change their direction, Su Ming appeared in front of them. causing his face in the blood moon to appear clearly before their eyes. Once they saw Su Ming's face clearly, their expressions changed drastically, and shock appeared on their faces. It was especially so for the woman. At that moment, she looked as if she had just seen a ghost. She instantly stopped moving and looked at Su Ming in disbelief. The girl sucked in a sharp breath. When she took 2 steps back, she instinctively said, "Why, you're still alive." Su Ming's expression had always been aloof, but at that moment, a thought appeared in his heart, and a hint of hatred appeared on his face. Similarly, the hatred on Su Ming's face was immediately seen clearly by the dozen-something sect elders in the field. At the same time, they saw Su Ming moving forward in the picture. When booming sounds rang out, shrill screams of pain reverberated in the air. It did not matter whether it was the girl or the disciples beside her. They were all in Su Ming's hands. It was clear that they were not Su Ming's opponent, just as the sect elders had expected. Yet right at the instant Su Ming was about to kill the girl, the red-robed man, sitting at the top of the field, suddenly opened his eyes for the first time. He lifted his left hand and pointed at the picture where Su Ming was. Immediately, the girl in the picture distorted and disappeared before Su Ming's eyes. Su Ming was just as the sect elders had expected. A stunned expression appeared on his face, and he looked around for a long time before he turned into a long arc and left into the distance with a hesitant look on his face. On the square, the dozen or so elders didn't say a single word. They all looked at the red-robed man, only to see the young woman in front of the red-robed man with terror on her face. The red-robed man had used some unknown method to forcefully bring her here. Before the girl could speak, the red-robed man had already lifted his right hand in an aloof manner and pushed down lightly on the top of her skull. A shrill scream of pain tumbled out of the girl's mouth. Her body twisted and trembled, and veins popped up on her face. This was a sign that all her memories were being searched by the red-robed man bit by bit. In just the span of a few breaths, the girl shuddered and turned into nothingness, disappearing from the red-robed man's hand. Wang Tao. He joined the sect 17 years ago. He has pretty good potential, but he's a coward. His fellow sect members used a secret art to control his body before the trial. His life force and cultivation base were taken away in exchange for 20 hours for this girl's cultivation base to increase. He should have died, but he survived. It's easy to make a judgment on this matter. A glint appeared in the red-robed man's eyes, and he looked at the incredibly beautiful woman who was still meditating in front of him. Sect Elder Lon, please cast your art and investigate this matter. The incredibly beautiful woman opened her eyes for the first time at that moment. She looked towards the picture where Su Ming was, and the light of deduction appeared in her eyes. After some time, she closed her eyes. This person has hidden potential. He belongs to the category of life, matrix established after destruction. He is a person born with a serendipity in his life. The divine soul of the 4 pillars of Tianyi exists. What do you mean? The red-robed man asked slowly. Life is precious, and it is rare in ancient Zong. With just one thought, a sect will prosper, and when it declines, the sect will fall into ruin. The body of Kismet will be punished by the heavens, and when it is killed, it will respond to the Tao. There is no solution to this. The incredibly beautiful woman said softly and closed her eyes, hiding the hint of confusion and shock in them. When the woman said those words, the dozen-something sect elders in the area immediately fell silent. Disbelief appeared on their faces. Even the red-robed man's eyes sparkled. Sect Elder Lon, you have never said such words about Life Matrix before. I want this child. I will take him in as my disciple. The blue-robed scholar said resolutely. At the instant he spoke, the eyes of the sect elders in the area sparkled, and they cast their gazes on Su Ming's picture. You can't do that. This child's personality is suitable for my cultivation method. It will be more appropriate for me to become his master. What a joke. I was the first one to see this child, so how can I let him fall into someone else's hands? The first time I saw him is fate, and this fate cannot be described with words. This child will follow me, and we will become masters in Avacania realm. The dozen-something sect elders immediately spoke up. What they valued was not Su Ming, but sect Elderland's words about life matrix. All right, I will personally take this child in as my disciple, the red-robed man said slowly with a frown. Once he spoke, the sect elders in the area immediately fell silent. They might be slightly unwilling to accept this, but they did not continue speaking. Only, your life matrix is a counter to this child's, and there are signs that you will die. It will be better for this child to become my disciple. The incredibly beautiful woman opened her eyes at that moment. Resolve and resolution appeared on her face as she spoke softly. Third chapter, please get monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 1505. The blood moon hung in the sky. In a world under the canyons, the moon around Su Ming was already nearly 500 feet big. It looked incredibly huge, and a thick, bloody stench filled the area. As Su Ming walked on the ground, gazes filled with respect looked towards him. Those gazes belonged to the hidden disciples and the cultivators whose fear had already suppressed their greed. During the short few hours, they had already imprinted Su Ming's figure in their minds. Before this, Wang Tao was a nobody. After that, Wang Tao's name became famous among the outer sect disciples. After all, some of the cultivators who survived knew the name of the body Su Ming possessed. At that moment, as Su Ming walked past the blood moon, his name rose to prominence. The clear sounds of the 100-something spirit plates in his hands crashing against each other floated in the quiet world, bringing with it an enchanting air of murder. It caused the hearts of the outer sect disciples of Seven Moons sect who heard it to tremble, and they did not dare to think of offending him. When Su Ming stopped on a mountain on the ground and sat down cross-legged at the top of the mountain, no one could see his figure from the distance. They could only see the blood moon at the top of the mountain, and it was incredibly brilliant. The mountain had already turned into an invisible forbidden zone. It did not matter whether the Seven Moons sect disciples outside fought against each other or snatched the spirit plates. No one dared to take even half a step into the place. As for Su Ming, he was still sitting there cross-legged and did not venture out. He had already obtained enough spirit plates and no longer had any desire to continue obtaining more. At that moment, he sat there quietly with a calm expression on his face, waiting for the end of what was just a game to him. There was not much time left. The scene of Su Ming sitting on the mountain was seen by the dozen-something sect elders in the field. They stared at Su Ming's side profile in the picture, at the blood moon, and at the 100-something spirit plates in his hands. Gradually, sect Elderland's words about life matrices appeared in their heads. For some unknown reason, even if these sect elders believed that they had reached the peak of their power, an indescribable feeling gradually rose in their hearts, and it was as if a chill had crept up their spines. A strange glint appeared in the eyes of the man in red robes. He looked at Su Ming in the picture and was also thinking about sect Elderland's words. After a long while, a confident smile appeared on his lips. This kid is my nemesis. I'm showing signs of perishing. Interesting. I'd like to see why I'm about to perish. The red-robed man's eyes flickered, and he slowly closed them. The incredibly beautiful sect Elder Lon looked at Su Ming's figure in the picture, and a hint of bewilderment appeared in the depths of her eyes before she slowly lowered her head. Why is this person's life so intertwined with mine? Look at the intertwining marks. It's not on me. Instead, it's on his life matrix. Why? As the people in the field fell silent, a figure gradually walked over from the distance beyond the invisible forbidden area formed by the mountain where Su Ming was in the trial grounds in the canyon. It was a tall and slender figure with a handsome face. He was dressed in white, and his long black hair danced in the wind, causing him to have a different kind of charm. However, there was also a calmness within that charm. That calmness was different from Su Ming's. Su Ming's calmness was because his heart was at peace and his face was still, but this person had a supreme heart, which was why his face had to be calm. That calmness meant that he was high above the masses and a sense of pride. However, that pride was in his heart and not on his face. He held a large number of spirit plates in his hands, and, judging by the number, there were a total of 100 of them. He stopped outside Su Ming's invisible forbidden area. When he lifted his head, he looked at Su Ming meditating in the blood moon on the mountain not too far away. He did not say a single word. He did not continue forward, but neither did he move back. He only stared at him. Time trickled by. When there was only the time it takes for an incense stick to burn before the trial ended. Only the white-robed teenager remained outside Su Ming's invisible forbidden area. He stared at Su Ming. Fighting spirit seemed to have gathered in his eyes. That fighting spirit was like fire, and it seemed to be burning in his eyes. Yilong. After a long while, he suddenly spoke. His voice echoed in the air and traveled into Su Ming's invisible forbidden area. It also reached Su Ming's ears. "My name is Yilong," the white-robed teenager said again. Su Ming opened his eyes and looked at the white-robed teenager's face. At the instant he saw him, a dazed look appeared in his eyes. It was as if he was not looking at Yilong, but the prodigy he had met outside Dark Mountain and on Windstream Mountain and Windstream Tribe. Yilong. It was the same expression, the same determination, the same tone, and the hidden sense of superiority in his heart. Su Ming did not speak. Instead, he closed his eyes again. The fighting spirit in Yilong's eyes might have become stronger, but he never took a step forward. At the instant the trial ended, he lifted his foot, but he took a step back. When he turned around, the entire world suddenly turned dark, and shrill roars rang out. A group of ferocious beasts with ferocious faces appeared in the clouds and fog in the sky. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that they were not beasts, but spirits, because their bodies were illusory and formed by fog. Once they appeared, they immediately charged towards the ground. Some of them rushed towards Su Ming, but at the instant they got close to him, the spirit plate in his hand shone with a dazzling light. The light reached 100,000 feet, causing terror to appear on the faces of the ferocious spirits that pounced on him. Just as they were about to retreat, their bodies were sucked into the spirit plates against their will, as if they were being sealed. Each spirit plate sealed a ferocious spirit. Su Ming sat down cross-legged, and in just the span of a few breaths, one spirit appeared in each of the 100-something spirit plates. The spirit plates with spirits still looked the same, but there were faint streams of light flowing about them, making them seem to have become extraordinary. Su Ming was not the only one who was like that. It was the same for Yilong. All the people in the trial world who had a spirit plate had sealed a ferocious spirit in it, and once they did so, they would not be attacked in the slightest. As for the Seven Moons sect disciples who did not obtain spirit plates, their shrill screams of pain and the sounds of their bodies being torn to shreds rose and fell in the trial world. The destructive spirits lasted for about an hour in the trial by fire. Then they faded away. Shockingly, a huge vortex appeared up in the sky, which rumbled as an ancient voice echoed out from within. Seven Moons Sect's outer sect promotion trial has ended. Congratulations on becoming inner sect disciple from now on. When the voice echoed in the air, a suction force appeared, and the figures on the ground turned into long arcs that charged towards the vortex. There were men and women among them. Some of them had excited expressions on their faces, and some had respect on their faces. Their expressions were different, and it was related to their actions in the trial ground. The excited ones were those who had avoided the disaster. The respectful ones were those who had been lucky enough to survive. There were also quite a number of people who had complicated expressions on their faces. When they looked at each other, they could see the killing intent and fighting spirit in each other's eyes. These people were clearly people who had formed grudges against each other due to the killings and robberies in the trial. Just as the group of people flew out towards the vortex in the sky, a long beam of light shot through the sky like a white dragon. It whistled through the air, and wherever it passed, the expressions of all the disciples changed, and they quickly moved out of the way. When they looked at the figure within the white beam of light, their gazes were filled with respect. It was Yilong. Yilong's expression was calm. Wherever he went, there was not a single obstacle. He charged towards the vortex in the sky. It was also during that instant that Su Ming stood up from the mountain. When he took a step forward, the blood moon did not disappear, causing his body to look like the blood moon that had turned into a long arc. When the world trembled, he walked towards the exit of the vortex. Almost at the instant Su Ming's blood moon appeared in the eyes of the disciples who were also heading towards the exit of the vortex, cries of surprise rang out. Unlike how they avoided Yilong when they saw him, when Su Ming approached them, shock and terror appeared on the disciples' faces. They instantly spread out, and when they looked at Su Ming, their gazes were filled with great fear. With Su Ming around, they did not dare to continue flying. Instead, they floated in midair. No one knew who was the first to wrap his fist in his palm, but soon after, all of them wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed to Su Ming. Greetings, eldest senior brother Wang Tao. Their voices were slightly scattered in the beginning, but soon they gathered together and turned into one voice that echoed in the air. Once he became the strongest among the outer sect disciples, he would naturally be given the title of eldest senior brother. It was the only title they had for Su Ming in their hearts. Their voices echoed in the air and spread in all directions. They also reached the ears of the dozen-something sect elders in the field. When they saw this, no one spoke. Only Yilong, who was in a corner of the picture, felt regret in their hearts. If Su Ming was not around, all of this would have belonged to Yilong. Yilong was silent. He stared at Su Ming, and after a long while, he also lowered his head, wrapped his fist in his palm, and bowed to him. Su Ming came to a halt. The blood moon around him gradually disappeared, and with a swing of his arm, it immediately turned into blood rain. When it scattered on the ground, he took a step forward and became the first to step into the vortex in the sky. Behind him was Yilong, and then the others. When all of them entered the vortex, the trial world immediately sank into darkness, as if it had been sealed off. Only the countless ferocious spirits in the darkness roared. Their voices were shrill and filled with madness, but they could not escape from the seal. They could only wait for the next 7 moons disaster. Only then would they be able to devour flesh and blood. Gradually, the shrill roars faded away, and suddenly a figure appeared under the stone monument Su Ming had once stared at in the depths of the dark ground. It was a person dressed in black robes. He stood there quietly and stared at the words on the stone monument. After a long while, he sighed softly. There was an ancient air in that sigh, along with a hint of nostalgia that no one else could tell. But if Su Ming was there, he would definitely be able to understand it. There's good news. The physical book of Chiu Mo will be appearing in all the bookstores and Dongdong's excellent book-selling website soon. There should be an event where the book will be signed and sold. I don't know which city it will be in, but I look forward to seeing my fellow Taoists smiling in that unknown city. The possibility of it being in Wuhan is very high. The second good news is that the physical book of Immortal Renegade was released in the past, and I gave each of the Alliance Masters a copy. It's a pity that the physical book was released too late, and the notice was also too late. Some of the Alliance Masters could not be contacted. Now, the physical book of Chiu Mo is about to be released, and I will also give each of the Alliance Masters a physical book with Chiu Mo's signature. This time, I will give you a notice beforehand. Please contact the sub-editor and leave your addresses. Once the book arrives, I will mail it to you. The Alliance Masters are the representatives of the book fans. I want to give all the readers a copy, but I really can't. I can only give it to the Alliance Masters. The other readers should not complain. The third good news is that I succeeded last night. Alipay and online banking have been locked down. I went to sleep happily, but in the morning, I was struck by a bolt from the blue. My wife told me that all the things she bought can be paid for upon delivery. Chapter 1506. Tao is not lonely. Those who understood Tao sighed that their Tao was not lonely, but what was Tao? Su Ming was also thinking about this question. It was just like how he was the first to walk out of the vortex at that moment, but there were no other emotions on his face. He was only calm, as if he was walking on the path of seeking Tao. Due to the calmness in his heart, his expression became indifferent. When he walked out, There was an old man among the near 100 cultivators in charge of the cultivation of the outer sect disciples in Seven Moons sect. When he saw Su Ming, his expression suddenly changed, and disbelief appeared on his face. Once the others saw Su Ming, they immediately sent voice transmissions to each other. Soon, all of their gazes instantly focused on the old man, whose expression had changed. There was envy in their eyes, and there was even a hint of respect in them. It was not the first time they sent disciples into the trial grounds, and they knew very well that no matter which trial it was, the person who had the right to be the first to walk out would definitely be the prodigy in the trial. But the old man's heart was cold at that moment. The smile he forced on his face was bitter, and he instinctively took a few steps back. At that moment, when the crowd's gazes landed on Su Ming's right hand, the area suddenly fell into dead silence. After some time, the sound of people sucking in sharp breaths could be heard. To their shock, they noticed that there were more than 100 spirit plates in Su Ming's right hand. A prodigy appeared in this trial. Haha, Brother Chun, you have hope of reaching a higher level this time. Congratulations. A prodigy actually appeared in your place. Shock immediately appeared on the cultivators' faces, but when they spoke, Yilong walked out from behind Su Ming. He also held 100 spirit plates in his hand, and it instantly caused the cultivators in the area to be completely shocked. Two chosen have appeared in this trial by fire. He's Yilong. I know him. He's the head attendant's disciple. 2 prodigies in one go. This is rare, even in the history of Seven Moons sect. I wonder whether they will become sect elders in the end, and whether there will be anyone who will step into Avicania realm within 100 years. The cultivators in the area were immediately shocked by Su Ming and Yilong's appearance. As they spoke, they continuously looked at Old Chun and the middle-aged scholar among the cultivators. There was a gratified smile on the scholar's face. When he looked at Yilong, his eyes were filled with praise, but when his gaze landed on Su Ming, his pupils shrank slightly. Clearly, Su Ming's appearance was completely out of his expectations. He had thought that Yilong would definitely be first. Compared to the middle-aged scholar, Old Chen's face was no longer pale, but his smile was still a little unnatural. When he swept his gaze past the people behind Su Ming, he did not see the girl who had absorbed the physical body Su Ming had possessed. A hint of pain appeared in his eyes, and when he looked at Su Ming, a hint of killing intent appeared in his eyes. When the people on the ground spoke, even the old man who was originally sitting and meditating in the sky had a hint of shock appear on his face. His gaze landed on Su Ming and Yilong, and he did not pay any attention to the disciples who had become intersect disciples who had walked out one after another behind them. When he stared at Su Ming and Yilong, the old man stood up. He would be a little more polite to the 2 prodigies. After all, no one knew what the 2 teenagers' future would be like. If he could form a good relationship with them while they were still weak, it would be beneficial for him in the future. He had seen a few examples like this before. At that moment, he stood up and was about to speak when a long arc sliced through the air from the direction of Seven Moons sect. When it closed in, it turned into a young man. The young man was dressed in a long red robe. His expression was aloof. Once he appeared, he swept his gaze across the land. When his gaze landed on Su Ming and Yilong, the aloof look on his face disappeared, and it turned into a smile. You must be junior brothers Wang Tao and Yilong junior brothers. Please come with me to the field in the inner sect. The sect elders are already waiting there, and they ordered me to bring you there. When the young man spoke with a smile, he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed to Su Ming, and Yilong. Su Ming got up and appeared beside the young man. When he wrapped his fist in his palm to return the greeting, Yilong stepped forward as well. The 3 of them immediately turned into long arcs and left into the distance, leaving behind only 3 afterimages and envious gazes from the people in the area. Junior brothers, you are both prodigies. I am very impressed that you were personally summoned by the sect elders this time. When the 3 of them moved forward, the young man spoke with a smile. At that moment, there was no longer any aloofness on his face. Clearly, that aloofness was only directed towards the people around him. As for Su Ming and Yilong, he would naturally not treat them with indifference. If we have the chance in the future, we will have to provide guidance to our fellow sect members. Besides, if there is anything you don't understand in the inner sect, feel free to come to me. I am Shun. Virtue is the virtue of morality, and Shun is the character, the young man said with a smile, then turned his head around to look at Su Ming and Yilong. At the instant Su Ming heard the young man's words, his pupils shrank in a barely noticeable manner. He scrutinized the young man before him, then nodded without a word. His expression might have seemed as calm as ever, but in truth, a huge storm had already raged in his heart. In that world, he saw a different Tianxia, a different Yuang, the wastelands of divine essence Star Ocean, and a different Shun. All of this forced Su Ming to think about it carefully again. Just what was this world? Was it truly the world in Xian Zhang's body? And he had clearly possessed him, so why had he formed a connection with it? But if this was truly the world in Xian Zhang's body, then why were there so many familiar people? Just what was going on? A hint of bewilderment appeared in the depths of Su Ming's eyes, but within that bewilderment was a hint of terror. It was a terrifying thought that had appeared in Su Ming's head, and he was terrified by it. After all, with Su Ming's level of cultivation and mental fortitude, even when harmonious Morris Alba was destroyed, he had not shown any fear, but at that moment, fear had indeed appeared on his face. But it was soon suppressed by Su Ming. I need more proof. I can't make a hasty decision. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He followed the young man, called the Shun, and stepped into the sky above the basin, surrounded by mountains in Seven Moons sect. Along the way, some things about the inner sect of the Seven Tao sect, and even some secrets were spoken by the young man, called the Shun, in great detail. From the distance, Seven Moons sect was incredibly huge. It looked as if it had formed a rune, causing everything in the place to be filled with an invisible, mighty pressure. When the three of them descended from the sky, the young man called the Shun continued speaking. From here onwards, you're not allowed to fly. This is an act of disrespect to the sect, and it will easily cause misunderstandings. That's why you must remember this, junior brothers. As he spoke, he brought Su Ming and Yilong to the field in the distance. On the way, they ran into quite a number of Seven Moons sect disciples. Most of them were very familiar with Deshan when they saw him. In fact, some of them even joked with him. It could be seen that Deshan had a lot of connections in the sect. Soon, when they were close to the field, Deshan stopped and rapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming and Yilong. Junior brothers, I can only send you up to here. Continue walking, and you will reach the field. If you meet again in the sect in the future, we will all be friends. If you have any questions, you can come and ask me, Deshan said with a smile. Once he bowed, he turned around and left. Su Ming cast a deep glance at Deshan's back. I don't like that person. He's too slippery. He definitely has a motive for getting close to him, Yilong said slowly from the side. I don't like him either. Su Ming smiled, then turned around and walked towards a field not too far away. Yilong cast a glance at Su Ming's back. He did not speak. Behind him, the two of them gradually walked into the field, but at the instant they did so, light shone on the ground, as if a rune had been activated. In an instant, light reached 100,000 feet and devoured Su Ming and Yilong. It was as if they had been relocated. When Su Ming and Yilong appeared again, they found that the field was still the same. The sect around them was still the same, but there was clearly not a lot of people around. It was quiet. There were a dozen-something huge chairs around the field. At that moment, there was a different person sitting on each of them, and right in front of them was a red-robed man. He supported his chin with his right hand and stared at Su Ming with sparkling eyes. Yilong sucked in a deep breath. With a neutral expression, he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed deeply towards the red-robed man in front of him. Greetings, sect elders. I am your disciple. Yilong, why aren't you bowing to me? The red-robed man did not look at Yilong. Instead, he stared at Su Ming and spoke slowly. There was a strange power in his voice. When it echoed in the area, it caused thunderclouds to tumble about in the sky. Su Ming did not speak. His gaze landed on the red-robed man's hand. Once he saw the pearl on his palm, he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed to him with a calm expression. The red-robed man cast Su Ming a deep glance, then suddenly smiled. Yilong is not bad. I will personally take him in as my disciple. As for Wang Tao, Sect Elder Lan, you must teach him well. 100 years later, let's see which of them will be the prodigy. As the red-robed man spoke, he swung his arm. Immediately, the dark clouds in the sky rumbled, and the entire field became indistinct. When a soft sigh rang out, the field disappeared, and Su Ming appeared in the same spot. The area around him was empty, except for an incredibly beautiful woman who had appeared in front of him. The woman stared at Su Ming, and he lifted his head to look at her. At the instant their gazes met, Su Ming could not help but have scenes flash in his head. It was the same for the woman. After some time, he snapped out of it, and a strange light shone in his eyes. The woman looked as if she did not want to meet his gaze and turned her head away. The woman was silent for a moment. Then, as if she had made her decision, she said softly, "Your life matrix is strange. I can't be a master either. Come with me. I will search for you a master who is worthy of your life matrix." The second update has been sent. I have uploaded Tian Xiezi's picture to my Prestige account. Those who are interested can take a look at it. Also, readers of China Mobile Reading Base, it's the easiest for you to use your Prestige account to look at people's pictures. Search for their official accounts and ears. Remember to take a look. Thank you for your monthly votes. Chapter 1507. As the woman's words echoed in the air, she turned around and walked into the distance. Su Ming stared at the woman's back, and a strange light shone in his eyes. The scenes that flashed in his head seemed to have made him remember something. In silence, Su Ming did not speak. Instead, he followed the woman's back and gradually walked into the distance. When he arrived at an octagonal ruin surrounded by towers to the left of Seven Moons Sect, he saw a huge pearl that was about 10 feet big floating above it. From the outside of the ruin, the pearl looked ordinary and did not have anything brilliant about it. However, when the female lead walked into the ruin and Su Ming did not enter, he immediately saw the pearl shining with a brilliant five-colored light. Strangely, that light was contained within the ruin and did not spread outwards in the slightest. That was why Su Ming could not see the five-colored light when he was outside the ruin. Only when he stepped into the ruin could he see the light shining. "Wait here for a moment. I'll be back in a moment." The woman looked at the five-colored pearl, then turned her head around to look at Su Ming. Her voice was very gentle, and she did not speak as if she regarded Su Ming as a member of the younger generation. Instead, there was a feeling that they were equals. Su Ming did not speak. He only nodded. The woman lowered her head. When she turned around, she lifted her right hand and pointed at the pearl. It immediately shone and looked as if it had turned into a water droplet. One of the droplets floated up and landed on the woman's fingertip. At the instant they touched each other, the water droplet covered the woman's entire body and brought her into the pearl. Su Ming stared at the pearl, and a glint appeared in his eyes. In silence, he sat down cross-legged on the ruin. With a calm expression, he closed his eyes and began meditating. Within the pearl was a world that looked like it belonged to the sky beyond the sky. The sky in that world was five-colored, and the ground was divided into 13 continents. Each continent seemed to contain countless lives. The woman stood in the sky and cast her gaze at the 13 continents. In the end, her gaze landed on the third continent. With a single move, she turned into a long arc that charged towards the third continent. As she neared, she saw that the land was covered with countless mountains, as well as cultivators. As she neared, all of the cultivators looked up at her, their faces filled with terror as they prostrated themselves on the ground to kowtow. The woman sped along until she reached the tallest mountain on the third landmass. The mountain was like a sharp sword that pierced into the void. From a distance, it looked majestic and emanated a frigid aura that caused the ground beneath the mountain to be covered in ice and snow. "Who are you?" At the instant the woman closed in on the mountain, a thunderous roar came from behind the mountain. Once it appeared, a giant that was several hundreds of thousands of feet tall and covered in blue fur revealed its head from behind the mountain. His eyes shone with a mysterious light as his words echoed out like a wild wind, causing ice and snow to fly everywhere and cover the sky. Junior Lon Lon greets Dharma King. I have an important matter to discuss with Master. The woman's footsteps came to a halt. When she looked at the giant, a respectful expression appeared on her face, and she lowered her head to bow. The blue-haired giant cast a careful glance at Lon Lon, then grinned. Once he nodded, he returned to the mountain and disappeared without a trace. Once the blue-haired giant disappeared, Lon Lon sucked in a deep breath. A resolute expression appeared on her face, and she turned into a long arc that charged towards the mountain. After a moment, she closed in on it, and her speed increased as she rushed towards the top of the mountain. Before long, after moving through layers of clouds, Lon Lon appeared at the top of the mountain. There at the top of the mountain was a gigantic coffin. That coffin had been sealed in ice in the cold wind, and it was the only thing on the top of the mountain. The coffin had no lid. Through the layers of ice, Lon Lon could see that there was a skeleton lying inside. It looked as if it was dead, and its body was shriveled up to the point that it did not even look human. Lon Lon walked to the side of the frozen coffin and stared at the corpse inside. She remained silent for a long time. Master, I'm sorry. I had to wake you up beforehand because I ran into something I cannot understand, because this matter will affect all of Seven Moons Sect, because the person involved in this matter is another great sect elder, and it is also related to a person whose life matrix is rarely seen in ancient Zong. I can't describe this person's life matrix clearly, but when I saw him, I felt as if I had known him for 3 lifetimes. Also, this person's life matrix is intertwined with Seven Moons Sect, and he can rise and fall with just one thought. I can't make decisions on my own, and Great Sect Elder Dao Han is showing signs of dying. Master, please forgive me for waking you up beforehand. Lon Lon said softly. Once she finished speaking, she gritted her teeth. When she raised her right hand, she sliced her left hand across the coffin. Blood immediately flowed out, but it did not drip down. Instead, it gathered at the tip of her finger, and its color gradually changed. It was no longer red, but golden. Then, a drop of golden blood fell on the ice on the coffin. At the instant it did so, it swiftly fused with the ice, causing it to turn golden right before everyone's eyes. At the same time, the entire mountain trembled with a bang, as if it was swaying. As it shook violently, cracks appeared on the ice on the coffin. Those cracks let out cracking sounds, and they fused together to form a huge runic symbol. In just the span of a few breaths, the runic symbol shone with a piercing golden light, causing the ice to start melting. As it did so, a large amount of white smoke spread out, and in the blink of an eye, it enveloped the coffin. Lon Lon took a few steps back and knelt down on one knee. More white smoke appeared, and the cracking sounds grew louder. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, when all the ice melted, the white smoke in the area spread out swiftly and surrounded the entire area, causing the top of the mountain to look as if it was surrounded by clouds and fog. At the same time, the moment the ice completely melted, the drop of golden blood landed at the center of the skeleton's brows. In the blink of an eye, it fused with it, and an endless amount of golden light spread out from the skeleton. That golden light turned into a wave of life force, and it instantly spread through the meridians, flesh, and blood in the skeleton. Wherever it went, the already withered meridians and withered flesh seemed to be filled with life force. When the golden light fused with the skeleton's withered heart, the heart turned the color of blood before everyone's eyes, and it started beating. Who woke me up? An ancient voice that seemed to have come from the void echoed in the air at that instant. As it appeared, all the lives on the 3rd continent trembled and knelt down. Disciple Lon Lon greets Master, Lon Lon said softly as she knelt down. Lon. The voice did not seem to have much consciousness. As its murmurs echoed in the air, A withered hand was suddenly lifted from the coffin. At the same time, the skeleton in the coffin opened his eyes to reveal a pair of black ones. The darkness in those eyes covered the color of his pupils. At the instant the skeleton opened his eyes, he slowly sat up in the coffin. The skeleton's entire body was withered, and he looked like a corpse that had been dried up for an unknown number of years. However, at the instant he sat up, the presence spreading out from his body could make the world freeze, make the air tremble, and make all wills lower their heads. It was a power that could make all lives tremble. It stood above all cultivators. It was the presence of a powerful warrior in the 7th level of Tao realm who had surpassed Tao immortal realm and was only one step away from becoming a great Tao paragon. That presence was still very weak, but no matter how weak it was still enough to destroy the heavens. Lan, my disciple, you should not have woken me up. It is not time for me to wake up yet. One person is in charge while 12 people are asleep. This is an ancient legacy. This is the law we must obey. Only by doing this can we continue living. Only by doing this can we continue becoming stronger, and you should not have woken me up ahead of time. This era is Great Sect Elder Dao Han's era. This is the era when he is in charge of 7 moons. In one era, there cannot be 2 great sect elders, and you actually broke the sect's highest rule. You woke me up 300 eons ahead of time. The withered skeleton sat in the coffin, and there was anger in his voice. It echoed in the world, causing the 3rd continent to rumble so loudly that it shook the heavens. Violent gusts of wind howled. When the skeleton spoke, a huge face appeared in front of Lan. It roared as if it wanted to devour her. A person with a life matrix, which is rarely seen in ancient Zong, has appeared. Lan gritted her teeth. Just as she was about to speak, the huge, illusory face suddenly distorted and turned into a huge hand that pushed down on the top of her skull. Lan did not dodge. Instead, she closed her eyes and simply allowed the hand to fall on her. At the instant it touched the top of her skull, the hand froze, and waves of Lan's memories were instantly sensed by the hand. After a moment, the palm disappeared. At the same time, the corpse in the coffin slowly stood up. At the instant he did so, the clouds around him tumbled backwards and charged towards his body. They fused into him, causing flesh and blood to gradually grow on his body. When he no longer withered, and his skin glowed, the clouds turned into a simple sky-blue Taoist robe that appeared on the body of the middle-aged man, who was strangely handsome and looked like a woman. Bring that person called Wang Tao here. You did very well in this matter. You should have woken me up ahead of time, my child. The middle-aged man walked out of the coffin. When he looked at Lan, a gentle and kind expression appeared on his face. The writing of this chapter was incredibly good. Monthly votes. Recommendation votes. Tomorrow, I will continue with the 3rd chapter. Let's see how many days I can last with the 3rd chapter this time. Chapter 1508. Su Ming, who was meditating on the rune of 7 Moon Sect's 5-colored pearl, opened his eyes slightly. He sensed a ripple of presence coming from the pearl. That ripple belonged to the woman. Once Su Ming sensed it for the span of a few breaths, Lan's face gradually appeared on the surface of the pearl. Don't worry, my master wants to see you. As Lan spoke, a drop of liquid appeared on the huge pearl and slowly floated towards Su Ming. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever. After a moment of pensive silence in his heart, he lifted his right hand and tapped the drop of liquid. In an instant, that drop of water covered his right hand, and in the blink of an eye, it covered his entire body. It turned into a suction force that dragged Su Ming's body into the pearl in an instant. At the same time, Lan's face gradually disappeared. Su Ming manifested in midair above the 13 continents in the world of the pearl. When he swept his gaze across the area, his pupils shrank in a barely noticeable manner, and he looked at the 3rd continent beneath him. He moved through layers of clouds and fog, and he seemed to see a middle-aged man dressed in a simple sky-blue Taoist robe, standing at the tallest mountain on the third continent. Lan Lan was by his side. At the instant Su Ming saw the man clearly, his pupils shrank slightly. The feeling he gave off was incredibly shocking. It was as if the entire world had to lower its head when he stood there. It was as if his appearance could make the world and the universe instantly dim, and only his figure could stand tall in the sky. Even if he stood on a plane, it was enough to make the plane stand above all mountains. When Su Ming's gaze landed on the middle-aged man from the distance, the middle-aged man in the simple sky-blue Taoist robe also cast his gaze on Su Ming. At the instant he saw Su Ming clearly, a glint appeared in the middle-aged man's eyes, and a profound smile appeared on his lips. "Come." When he spoke faintly, his voice spread through the air and landed in Su Ming's ears. A vortex appeared in front of him, and within it was the mountain where the middle-aged man stood. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he stepped into the vortex. When he reappeared, he was already standing at the top of the mountain, right in front of the middle-aged man, rising and falling with a single thought. Interesting, interesting. The middle-aged man scrutinized Su Ming, and a smile appeared on his face. It seemed to contain some sort of epiphany. When he shook his head, he swung his arm, and a blue plate charged toward Su Ming. "Forget it. I'll take in another disciple." The middle-aged man had just finished speaking when his expression suddenly changed. He looked at the sky, and his eyes instantly became bloodshot. There was hesitation on his face, but it quickly turned into determination. "I'll accept you as an elite apprentice." Regarding matters of cultivation, Lan Lan, you'll be in charge of them. Wang Tao is not your junior brother, but rather your elder brother. I will allow you to use all of the rules of the sect to make your elder brother Wang Tao the most powerful member of my bloodline. The middle-aged man in the simple and unadorned sky-blue Taoist robe no longer spoke slowly, but in a hurry. Once Lan Lan heard it, her eyes went wide, and surprise and bewilderment appeared on her face. She originally thought that her master would take in Su Ming as a disciple in name, but she did not expect that he would be an elite apprentice. In fact, he would even be her senior brother. This did not fit with Lan Lan's previous judgment, but it was also because of it that Lan Lan instantly came to a realization. Her master might value Wang Tao even more than she had expected. "Let's go. F.A. Wang, send them away immediately." The expression of the middle-aged man in the simple and unadorned sky-blue Taoist robe changed again. When he spoke in a low voice, he lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Immediately, a violent gust of wind howled, and the giant covered in fur behind the mountain charged up. He grabbed Su Ming and Lan Lan and charged into the sky. At the instant the giant stepped into the sky, he broke through space and disappeared. Before he did so, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. When he lowered his head to look, he saw blood trickling down the corners of the middle-aged man's mouth. Almost at the instant Su Ming was brought out of the world by the hairy man, the middle-aged man in the sky-blue Taoist robe on the mountain suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. As he coughed up blood, his body instantly aged, and he even looked as if he was withering away, causing him to take a few steps back. When he lifted his head, there was a ferocious look on his face, but he still started laughing loudly. He stole the kismet of the world and stood above all existences. He is the third prince of ancient Zong, but he isn't. But no matter what, this person has an indescribable status, and if I become his master, I will have a chance to become a great Tao paragon. In fact, becoming a Tao divinity is no longer just a dream. But this person's kismet is so great that even with my level of cultivation, I cannot withstand the backlash from becoming his master's life matrix. The old man threw his head back and laughed. Then he coughed up blood again and moved back. This time, his face was incredibly pale, and he looked like his life force was about to end. With a single thought, 7 Moons Sect's golden age might be about to arrive. My 11 fellow Taoists, do not continue sleeping. Wake up. The man who had already turned into an old man lifted his right hand at that moment and pushed down on the mountain under his feet. With it, the mountain roared, and the entire continent started trembling violently. As it trembled, it affected the void ocean and the other continents around it, causing all the other continents to tremble, except for the 13th continent at the edge. At the same time, as the 11 continents trembled, 11 old presences erupted violently from them. This is the chance to become a divinity master. This is the chance to become a divinity master. This chance is the final chance for the 12 of us. As the old man's voice echoed in the air, the 11 presences erupted swiftly. They turned into 11 long arcs that charged towards the mountain where the old man was. They instantly descended and turned into 11 men and women whose withered bodies were rapidly changing. Without another word, once they appeared, they sat down cross-legged and surrounded the old man in the sky-blue Taoist robe. They formed a rune. The rune instantly shone with a powerful white light that spread out in all directions. Once it covered the entire world, it looked as if it had turned into white nothingness. At the same time, Su Ming and Lan Lan manifested outside the pearl in the rune in Seven Moons Sect. Lan Lan cast a few scrutinizing glances at Su Ming before she spoke softly. "Senior brother, you have indeed obtained a serendipity. Since Master has already taken you in as his successor, you should return to Master's line of succession." When Lan Lan spoke, she lifted her right hand, and a blue plate appeared on her palm. There was a picture of mountains surrounded by fog drawn on it. When she touched it gently, her body instantly disappeared into the plate. The plate shone and disappeared without a trace. Su Ming had a pensive look on his face. He turned his head around and cast a glance at the pearl, which was no longer shining with five-colored light. In silence, he brought out his blue plate. Once he cast a glance at it, he patted it. In an instant, he disappeared from Seven Moons Sect. When he reappeared, he was on a tall mountain. It was so tall that it shot into the clouds, and it looked exactly the same as the one above the middle-aged man on the third continent. There were quite a number of exquisite towers on the mountain, and there were quite a number of cultivators in them. When Su Ming cast his gaze over, he could see a layer of white snow in the distance. There was a huge palace on the mountain. After staring at the palace for some time, Su Ming averted his gaze and looked at the foot of the mountain. He saw Seven Moons Sect at the foot of the mountain, but when he looked at it, he felt as if there was a layer of haze over it. It was as if Seven Moons Sect's buildings were slightly indistinct in his eyes. In fact, more accurately speaking, they overlapped with each other. It was as if several buildings belonging to Seven Moons Sect had overlapped with each other to form a feeling. Seven Moons Sect was located in a basin. There were mountains around it, and the mountain where Su Ming stood was one of them. There are 7 layers of sky beyond the sky in Seven Moons Sect. The first layer is the world of the outer sect where you were previously. The square in the inner sect and everything you see now are all from the first layer. Master's world is the 7th layer of sky beyond the sky. As for the 6th layer, only the great sect elder who has been in charge of the sect for generations can possess it. It can be considered a supreme treasure. Right now, we are in the 5th layer. This is the place where only the direct descendants of the great sect elder have the right to stay and train. The 4th layer is where the sect disciples are assigned based on their seniority. My disciples live in the 4th layer, and it's the same for the disciples of the other sect elders. The 3rd and 2nd layers are where the inner sect disciples are assigned based on their levels of cultivation. Besides the outer sect, the 1st layer is also where Seven Moons Sect is located. Lan Lan walked out from beside Su Ming and looked at Seven Moons Sect at the foot of the mountain. Seven Moons Sect's cultivation method is the 7 lives art. Once you form 7 lives, you can sit in the 7th layer of sky beyond the sky and form 7 illusions outside. When you practice it to the peak and become a level 1 Tao divinity, you can overlap your body and form 7 levels of Tao divinities. The plate Master gave you contains the cultivation method of the direct descendants of Seven Moons Sect. Senior brother, you could try to understand it on your own. Your level of cultivation is still low, so if there's anything you don't understand, you can come to me. Before you reach Avacania realm, let me take your place in managing Master's Mountain Sect. Lan Lan cast Su Ming a deep glance, then lowered her head and bowed to him. When she turned around, she stepped into the air and appeared in the snow-covered palace at the top of the mountain. Senior brother, if you like any part of this mountain, you can turn it into a cultivation abode. Only her faint voice still echoed in the snow and reached Su Ming's ears. Su Ming's expression was calm. He stared at the indistinct 7 moons sect at the foot of the mountain, and after a long while, a glint appeared in his eyes. This so-called master should have discovered something, but this is in line with my intentions. If I want to witness the truth, I need to see how others do things. By doing so, I can verify my guess. Yesterday's chapter was very awkward. I thought that I had written it with a certain feeling, but I didn't expect that it would turn out like this. I watched the movie Night many years ago, but when I wrote it yesterday, I really didn't do it on purpose. I just wrote it without realizing it, or else I wouldn't have been able to say that I had a certain feeling when I wrote it. I apologize to all of you. I didn't do it on purpose. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.